Today, we're going to be watching Adam Conover from Adam Ruins Everything debate Tim Pool. On what? Who knows? But the point is that Adam Conover is a fairly aggressive liberal Democrat, kind of can be annoying sometimes. As a matter of fact, I think Adam Conover is the kind of guy who makes me never want to claim the term Democrat, not only because I don't believe in it philosophically, but Adam Conover is so annoying I don't want to be associated with him. That being said, Tim Pool can also be a little bit of an edgy boy. He can also say very silly things, and apparently they have a very spicy debate. Tim Pool is one of those like, you know, I'm a liberal, but... And then it turns out that everything that MAGA does is actually awesome. And everything that Trump does, even when he does bad stuff, you can bend yourself backwards in order to understand what Trump is doing. So just bear that in mind. Tim is a quote unquote liberal who ended up going MAGA. And then Adam Conover is the classic annoying BuzzFeed liberal. Let's go.
War, we got a special episode today. It's not necessarily about a core issue. It's we're being joined by Adam Conover.
Hey, thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming, man. Who are you? What do you do?
I'm a comedian. I've made a couple television shows in the past, did a true TV show, did a Netflix show. I'm a stand-up comic. I'm going to be in Charleston, South Carolina this weekend, and you guys invited me. Thought I'd swing by.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
You had what year was that show, Adam Ruins Everything?
It first came out in 2015, I think, and ran until 2019. We did like 4 or 5 cycles of it.
My mom loved your show.
Oh.
And I think she watched regularly. I watched a handful, to be honest. I'm not gonna.
That's fine.
But you did have one really good one on gun control. That I thought was good because you pointed out Reagan was the start of gun control, and you had probably one of the most, I think, honest portrayals when you had a Black Panther and like a white rural fat guy, both being like, yes, guns.
Yeah.
Because we often see this depiction where it's like racists are mad, like they lump all 2A people in with like all white supremacists or whatever.
Yeah.
And they try and act like conservatives are mad that Black people have guns. And it's like the 2A guys are not racist. It's a totally different ideology.
Oh yeah, we made the point in that video though that you know, those people tend not to defend like Black people who are you know, the Philando Castile case, right, was one of the ones that we talked about. But that's, you know,
that actually was a really interesting case too, because there were a lot of people on the right. For people who don't know, this is what was the guy got pulled over. I think he was smoking weed. He had a gun. He didn't draw it or anything, but the cop just shot and killed him.
I believe what happened, this is so many years ago, and I've done so many things that like my memory for stuff like this isn't as good as it used to be, but I believe he said, like, officer, I have a firearm, and you know, which is what you're supposed to do, and the officer shot him, I think, at that point.
Yeah, like he didn't draw it or anything.
Yeah.
It was interesting to see the risk.
Yeah, so the way that the Philando Castile case, this is actually one of the most horrific cases ever, is because the guy was a concealed weapons carrier, okay, Philando Castile. And there was a robbery in the neighborhood, you know, a few days ago. And Philando Castile, God help me, did look like the robber a little bit, but the pictures of the robber were like grainy CCTV footage. So I would never have the balls to see a Black guy with like, I don't remember his exact hairstyle, but let's just use this as a, you know, a description. I would never see a tall, skinny guy with twists who had approximately the same skin color as another Black guy and then have the balls to pull him over on suspicion of robbery because they look similar from grainy CCTV footage. That's crazy. So the fact that the cop stopped him just for looking like a robbery suspect, totally different clothes, no ability to discern height, all that kind of stuff, that's crazy already. So the cop thinks that he's stopping a robbery suspect, and so he's already jumpy. He gets out. Philando Castile is like a normal dude and has a concealed weapons permit and has a gun. And so the cop, you know, comes up on him and he's like, just to let you know, officer, I have a gun. And then boom, the cop shoots him in the chest. And it's like, there's no justification for that. Like, having a firearm is not a death sentence, right? So what was that? And so K-Soko says Philando was murdered in front of his daughter and wife. Yeah, his wife was like, what the hell? What did you just do? And it's like, yeah, he killed her husband. And then the kid was in the back seat. And it's just, what the hell? And so that was actually the one of the cases that's just totally indefensible. in my opinion. Azrai says, at Counterpoints, I sub to your Patreon because YouTube won't take my filthy HVAC money. Well, thank you. Thank you, Azrai. I do appreciate it. Patreon.com/counterpoints for those so inclined. Yeah, let's take a look and see what happened to the cop in Philando Castile. What happened to the police officer in Philando Castile's case? I wouldn't be surprised if it got dismissed because he, was working off he was probably able to articulate what he was afraid of and why. Officer Geronimo Yanez, who fatally shot Castile in 2016, was acquitted on all charges in June 2017. He was later fired from St. Anthony Police Department. His application for a teaching license was denied by the Minnesota Professional Educator Licensing and Standards Board. The PLSB cited his actions in the Castile shooting as evidence of an immoral character, and an appeals court upheld the decision. So he became publicly unemployable. And despite not being in jail, he was fired, which I'm okay with. That's fine because he did kill a man unjustly. Yeah. Well, he was charged, but he was dismissed. Kingslayer Damocles says it shouldn't be, but if you have a gun on you, the cop is going to be cleared 9.5 out of 10 times. Yeah. Yep. Do you post any exclusive content? No, I don't. I'm already busy with everything I'm doing. Conservatism says BLM never took this case up because the cop wasn't white and the black guy was armed, but legally and was compliant. Good times. Yeah. See, that's the funny thing is I think more white people would have been sympathetic, including myself. More conservatives would have been sympathetic to Black Lives Matter if they had made Philando Castile the poster boy of BLM instead of, who was that kid who beat the crap out of the cop? Who's the hands up, don't shoot kid? Who was that? He was a teenager. He beat up a store clerk. Mike Brown. Was it Mike Brown? Hands up, don't shoot, shooting suspect. Was it Mike Brown? Sorry. Mike Brown shooting. I can recognize his face. Yep, it was Mike Brown. So this kid went to like a gas station, and I forget what the argument was. I think part of the argument was like he was stealing cigarillos, and like the clerk owed him money or something, and then he just shoves the clerk out of the way and steals the cigarillos. Then he's walking down the street, and a cop car pulls up right next to him and rolls down the window, which is like suicidally stupid. Approaching a robbery suspect by driving up immediately behind them and then rolling down your window is one of the dumbest things you could possibly do. It's to the point that it's almost negligence, in my opinion. And so Mike Brown gets into a fist fight with the cop through the window, starts punching the cop in the face, and then the cop pulls the gun. They wrestle over the gun, and then they shoot him in the chest. Mike Brown runs away for a minute and then turns back around and comes back towards the officer, and then the officer gunned him down. That was the Mike Brown case. Just totally insane case. And yes, there are, let's say that this is the scenario. Let's say Mike Brown was walking down this street and then this cop pulled up right next to him and rolled down his window. That is the easiest way to get killed as a cop. It was legitimately a stupid way to approach the situation. What you would do if you're not a moron is you would drive up behind the suspect, you would park, you would direct your other officers via radio to intercept up front, and then you would park, get out, and confront on foot from 20 to 30 yards away. And the reason why is because if he pulls on you, if he pulls a firearm, you want to decrease the likelihood that he will be accurate, and you want to increase the likelihood that you have time to pull your gun and fire. So again, pulling up next to a person and confronting them through the window of your car is suicidally stupid. I'm sorry for the random BLM cop shooting rant, but it's true. It's true. I think a lot of people would be more sympathetic to BLM if the movement had any discernible principles. Most cases I heard of they jumped on was just amoral opportunism. Yeah, that was one of my frustrations when BLM got big. It was probably like 9 months into the BLM cycle where they were getting big after Mike Brown, after Trayvon Martin, after the guy up in New York who died from positional asphyxia because he was selling Lucy cigarettes. After all those cases, they jumped on cases that didn't make sense. like cases where the guy was a felon committing a crime, had pulled a gun and beaten up somebody else, and then was fighting over a gun with the cops and then got killed. And it's like, why is that a problem? That's not a problem. What if you have a gun and you're fighting law enforcement and you get killed by cops? That's not somebody that should be a part of BLM, in my opinion. But nobody listens to me. So, whatever. Commander Haircut says, BLM must have had the same problem that Occupy Wall Street did because I didn't follow it closely and associate it more with George Floyd. Yeah, but George Floyd, you have to bear in mind, George Floyd was like 3 years into BLM. George Floyd was the zenith of BLM's popularity, but they had already been rolling as a movement for like 2 or 3 years. Azrai says, link in a Patreon to my Discord, remove me from the Counterpoints Discord. Weird. I'll add you back in. Don't worry about it. Kingslayer Damocles says, except the officer didn't know Mike Brown was a suspect at the time. He just wanted to tell Brown to walk on the sidewalk for safety. I don't know if that's true. That might be part of the narrative. I don't know. Pretty sure he knew he was the suspect. We'll Google it later. Don't worry about it. We'll break it down another day. BLM started much earlier. Even if they didn't use the term BLM during Trayvon Martin was 100% a part of the highlighting of black victims of white/law enforcement violence. BLM was understandable about racism and police brutality regarding black victims, but they would have gotten more sympathy given they focused on all forms of police brutality. Agreed. Anyways, I'm sorry for yapping about BLM and police violence for so long, but we're having fun. We're having fun in chat. Let's continue.
He like had it stored in the car properly.
Yeah. And then a lot of conservatives were like, yeah, well, you shouldn't have been smoking weed. And I'm like, whoa. Like, yes, but you don't die because you're armed. You have a right to keep and bear arms. So that was an interesting contrast. But anyway, that was, you got a lot of praise from the Pro 2A people because they were like, hey, this guy's, he's being honest. It's like, there are Pro 2A people. They're not all going to be racist, white supremacists or whatever. But anyway, I digress. I'm curious. Well, I guess I can ask you something simple first. Like, what are you currently working on?
Currently, everything I'm doing is like podcast, YouTube, right? The like mainstream entertainment industry kind of stopped making the kind of comedy I make, and so YouTube has like replaced television for so many people. It's the #1 streaming app on televisions. Their top format is television sets, and so that's where I've moved all my shit. And so yeah, I do kind of similar stuff to what I used to do on cable, doing it on YouTube on a weekly basis. And I'm a touring comic.
Right on. Well, let's jump into the current state of affairs. We've got a second Trump administration, non-consecutive. What's your take on what is currently happening politically and culturally?
Damn. Yeah, I mean, you're going to disagree. Your audience is going to disagree. That's
the point, right?
It's hard. Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to, Tim Pool destroys woke comedian. It's fine. You can start the clip at this point if you're doing your response videos, Yeah, I mean, it looks like a pretty clear fascist authoritarian takeover of the U.S. government. It's we got people being thrown into unmarked vans. We got like the destruction of the civil service, which is like a pretty
Sorry, I'm checking out the Mike Brown stuff while it's running. So this is contradictory, and somebody, Kingslayer, brought up a point that I don't know if it's going to be able to be substantiated. So Brown and his friend Dorian Johnson left the market at noon. At noon, the dispatch described the suspects as wearing blah, 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 blah. Ferguson Police Chief Thomas Jackson said the incident with Brown stealing cigars had nothing to do with why Brown was stopped by Wilson prior to the shooting, and that the reason was Brown and Johnson were stopped because they were walking down the middle of the street blocking traffic. That being said, at noon, Wilson reported he was back in service and radioed units 25 and 22 to ask if they needed backup. 7 seconds later, an unidentified officer said the suspects had disappeared. Wilson called for backup at 12:02, saying, "Put me on Canfield with 2 and send me another car." So that could have been, he was telling them to get out of the road, and then it became the fight. So you, Damocles, I'm putting it at like 70-30. You're right, and I'm wrong. I'll put it at 70-30 that you're right and I'm wrong. So it looks like the reason for the stop might have been him walking down the middle of the road, and then it just escalated from there. Okay, cool.
standard authoritarian tactic, like early on in a administration of that type. Yeah, it's like sort of remains to be seen how far they'll get, and if they'll actually be able to transform in America in the ways that they're trying to. But yeah, it's pretty. My side of America, people are a little on edge. It's a little frightening to folks.
Yeah, my take on that would be largely because corporate press is lying to them, largely. And
what corporate press? There's no corporate press left, hardly.
Well, I would say their viewership is rapidly diminished.
Yeah.
But still, when you look at, there was a Real Clear Politics aggregate polling found that they didn't do it necessarily by demographic. They did it by decade age bracket. So it was like 20 to 29 or whatever. Every age group except for 70 plus was pro-Trump, was a few points above.
Real Clear Politics did a average, and they said that every age group in
except
America,
for 70 plus,
every age group except for 70 plus is pro-Trump.
Yeah, let me see if I can try and find it.
And this is contrasting to like all the approval rating stats I've seen have him at like 47% and dropping or something that.
It's largely based on the older crowd.
Just old. That seems like the opposite of every stat I've seen in the past. But I don't like.
Come on, Timmy. Come on, brah. You gotta be ready, right? Corporate press is lying about Trump, which is why people are panicked. So I'm going to tell you why I'm frustrated with Trump, okay? I'm frustrated with Trump because he's shat on the Constitution. He made fun of John McCain, which you can hate John McCain, but the dude is still a war hero. He still flew fighter jets. He still got tortured in Vietnam. So shitting on him was one of the first times that I was like, fuck you, Trump. I'm not going to vote for you. Then in his first term, he effectively was hands off with the economy. The economy was doing well. But then he mismanaged COVID and he waffled back and forth on whether or not we should shut down the economy, whether or not we should do vaccines, whether or not we should do this, whether or not we should do that. And so as a result, I think through incompetence, 1.1 million people ultimately died because he couldn't pick a lane. He wanted to go along with the health stuff, but then he saw that his base was rebelling against the health stuff. So then he just kept pandering to them over and over again. And as a result, I think a substantive amount of people died. Then after that, after he kind of lost, he blamed all of the economic calamities of COVID on Biden, despite him overseeing some of the things that would cause inflation. He himself put his name on the checks, and he also signed off on the decreased economic activity that caused the inflation of the Biden admin. Then he blamed all the economic woes on Biden. And also, while there was a transition for power, he effectively ginned up a completely false narrative about the election being stolen and tried to throw a riot in order to maintain power. And he used the false elector scheme in order to try to maintain power. So what the hell, right? That's already bad enough. Not to mention that in the second run, he's had an insane 100 days where he's evaporated our soft power, killed tens of thousands of people internationally through negligence and stupidity, backstabbed Ukraine, backstabbed Europe, sucked up to Qatar, sucked up to Putin. And then it was only once Putin played him that he had any kind of sense whatsoever in order to realize what was actually going on in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. So no, I don't think it's the corporate press lying to me. I think that there are descriptively evil things that the Trump admin is doing and responsible for that you cannot defend logically from a Republican who cares about a republic perspective. So yeah, that's insane to me that Tim would say that out loud. Yeah, you can think that McCain, yeah, Christian Valera says, tried to steal an election, inspired an attack on the Capitol, justified the attack, pardoned the terrorists, endorses violent rhetoric against the media and his opponents. Yeah, this is just like the tip of the iceberg. This is what what I can recall off of the top of my head. This isn't even like an in-depth analysis about all of Trump's sins. Oh, don't forget, McCain was also made pro-Viet Cong propaganda. Yeah, under duress. Let me break your fingers and see if I can make you do, pro-Viet Cong propaganda. Okay. Also, Trump was a flat-footed draft dodger. how does he get to hate on making pro-Viet Cong propaganda when McCain's fingers were getting snapped and Trump dodged the draft and avoided Vietnam? He doesn't get to do that. Not in my book. Maybe that works for you guys. It doesn't work for me. K Soko says, unlike Trump, I think McCain is a hero. Yeah, you can say he has bad politics and still had the stones to be a naval aviator. Sapien Green says, Tim knows that what Trump is doing is bad and fascistic. He just doesn't care because he wants that Trump is doing to happen, but all admitted before. Yeah, he thinks that it'll all come out in the wash. You could write a book on all the horrible stuff he's said and done, 100%, and I think people have. Trump had bone spurs, man. Come on. Yeah. Yes. All right. Anyways, sorry.
Like, follow this really closely.
Yeah. I don't know how to find this image because it was a few weeks ago, but let me see if I can try and pull it up and talk at the same time, which I probably can't. But I don't actually. Do you want to see if you can try and find it while we talk? Otherwise, I'm going to be sitting here typing.
No problem.
Out of my mind. Yeah. So what I would say is like the obvious story. We debated this last week live is the Abrego Garcia story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the take that I've typically seen from liberals is actually I'll use a specific example. The David Pakman subreddit. Pakman, of course, has millions of followers. He gets 100 million views per month. And his audience on Reddit was saying, this is just a family man who is trying to escape harsh conditions in Central America, who has been effectively disappeared by the Trump administration, which is a gross mischaracterization of what happened. If we were to say that a judge granted Abrego Garcia withholding of deportation due to Barrios 18 in Guatemala and threats against his life in El Salvador, then the question of due process is he needed to get a hearing as pertaining to that withholding of deportation. But he did already have two hearings in which he was determined to be an MS-13 gang member. He was pulled over and law enforcement believed him to be human trafficking. He has 2 filings from his wife for beating her. She was filing orders of protection. And so it's fine if, in my view, the liberal side of things, or the, podcasters like Pakman and Brian Tyler Cohen and others are going to say, hey, he was supposed to get a hearing. Agreed. But it is a gross mischaracterization. So when you mention that, people on the left are on edge, I'm like, yeah, well, they think that a guy who lives in Maryland who was working like a regular union job or whatever just disappeared one day, as opposed to a guy who had gone through several hearings, was arrested with MS-13, had symbols on his hand that law enforcement believe were MS-13 gang tattoos. And so the real question is, what was the error in that deportation? On the right, it's legally called harmless error, in that he didn't get a hearing as to the withholding of deportation. However, he wouldn't have got it approved anyway. So the answer now is a formality. It's paperwork, it's a Zoom call, and then it's done. But people on the left, the liberal side of things, they think that this is a working class family guy who's vanished one night, an American citizen. And I think it was actually Hassan.
Well, people don't think he's an American citizen. I mean, they're up to speed on like
Hassan Piker thought he was from Maryland. Legit. And so
okay.
and we're talking, and I know it's not you, but this is like the 7th biggest live streamer in the country. Almost every single day, Hassan gets 50K.
But he's a liar.
He actually said on his stream in response to the comments I made at the White House, what do you mean he's not from Maryland? Are you saying he's from DC? He's from Maryland. No, he's from El Salvador. He only lived in Maryland for a few years.
Okay. I mean, that guy talks for, 8 hours a day. Like, you can parse, any particular
For sure.
statement. But like, I mean, that to me, everything that you said, first of all, half of it sounds unrelated. Like, he's had past interaction with law enforcement, like domestic violence and stuff like that. To me, that's like neither here nor there. It's like character stuff.
So hold on. I'm going to disagree with Adam right now, although I do understand if the liberals in my chat disagree with me. I think that the Democrats have made a mistake by picking Kilmar Abrego Garcia over Andre Hernandez, because Andre Hernandez is a gay man who doesn't have any gang affiliations that I know of, who was deported to Sakot and is being held without trial. And I have no idea what his fate is, but these are the tattoos, was like the crowns with mom and dad on it. And he's literally a gay hairdresser. You know what I'm saying? So I think that this should have been the face of the movement, so to speak. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, I think it is relevant. He has not had a criminal conviction in 14 years. That's something to his credit. In 2019, he was detained in a Home Depot parking lot in the presence of 2 confirmed MS-13 gang members. They had marijuana and drugs on their person, but they threw it under a car, so I don't think they were able to assign it to anyone. When it came to Kilmar Abrego Garcia, he did have $1,200 cash on his person. He was also wearing a Hear No Evil, Speak No Evil, See No Evil sweater, which is associated with Hispanic gang culture. He was also wearing a Chicago Bulls hat, and the main symbol for MS-13 is the devil horns. So it's viewed as a dog whistle for MS-13. There was a third-party witness or whatever who said that he was clicked up. Whether or not he was, who knows. Then in a different year, he was pulled over by a state trooper with 8 non-citizens in the car. That car was registered to somebody who does do human trafficking. Then, what was it? In 2021, his wife accused him of battery. And so this is, for me, this is relevant because it's a due process violation. I agree it's a due process violation. It's an egregious due process violation. And the way that the Trump admin has ignored the courts, I find repulsive. And it points to their fascistic tendencies. But I do think that Kilmar Abrego Garcia probably is a bad hombre and shouldn't be in the United States of America. So that's my opinion. You don't have to agree with me. Christian Blair says, if you are on Pool again and this comes up in a combo, you should correct the record. I probably will. Sacred Snow says, I don't care about Kilmar. I care about the harmless error because of people like Andre. Exactly. That's I'm with you there. Conservative liberalism says, leave it out to the left to pick the wrong figurehead again and again and again and again. Seriously. K. Soko says, liberals didn't pick them. Trump picked them, and we are trying to defend our constitutional rights domestically. Okay. But at the same time, we pick, K. Soko, we pick who we choose to talk about. Trump can say, Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a bad hombre, and we can say, yeah, maybe, but he's still entitled to due process. That can be the line of argumentation. That's perfectly fine, and I accept that. Andre Hernandez, I don't think anybody has come up with a single reason yet why this dude belongs in Guantanamo Bay, El Salvador. So maybe he's like a coke dealing murderer assassin who's able to hide it behind his gay persona. But because we haven't focused on Andre Hernandez Romero, we don't know. And this dude is still stuck in Guantanamo Bay. Guantanamo Bay, El Salvador, I should be specific. Are crowns even associated with Tren de Aragua? No idea. I think they say that it is, even if it isn't. Crowns are very common in tattoo culture. Inflation is the fault of the Federal Reserve, claiming inflation was transitory for a year to keep interest rates close to 0% and do trillions in quantitative easing buying mortgage-backed securities. Sure. I heard someone say the other day that just the flights have cost tens of millions of dollars to ship the migrants to Sukkot. I think Garcia was chosen because Trump already admitted an error. Yeah, I agree. But maybe do a little bit of preliminary research before we make him the face of the improperly deported people. Andre Hernandez is the Philando Castile of extrajudicial deportations. You're right. Conservative liberalism, you're so right. Because Philando Castile is nowhere near as well known as Mike Brown, as Eric Garner, as George Floyd, as whatever. And yet he is such the obvious example of police malfeasance and brutality. He was an infinitely better, I hate to say martyr for the cause, but Philando Castile was an infinitely better martyr for the cause than those other 3 characters. Eric Garner, to a degree, is an okay martyr. And then same thing with these cats. Andre Hernandez is infinitely better as a martyr than Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Maybe, if it's maybe, then he should be on trial. Sure, I agree. But K. Soko, we as a country, you don't have to agree with me, but this is the way that I see it. We as a country, when it comes to immigrants, we have a choice on who we allow into the country. And we also have choices. So we can allow a Indian immigrant from Gujarat with $300,000 who's ready to buy a gas station and start a small business, and he doesn't need welfare. That's one immigrant that we can take into the country. Then we have Central and South Americans who are coming from collapsed, failed states who are interested in working in the construction and agricultural industries, but they might need some welfare, like TANF, temporary assistance for needy families. I don't even know if illegal immigrants are entitled to that. I don't think they are. But let's just pretend that we're just being racist and all immigrants use welfare, okay? So they might need some assistance while they're doing the jobs that are necessary for the American economy to work. Okay, I like those people. I want them in the country. I think they're decent. Now, within that subcategory, you have the dude who works his job, goes home, takes care of his wife, takes care of his kids, no interactions with law enforcement, no criminal tattoos, no drug consumption. Then you have Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who has the marijuana leaf, the smiley face, the cross, and the skull on it, which is symbolically assumed to be M for marijuana, S for smiley face, cross for 1, 3 holes for the skull. And then he's also caught in the presence of gang members. He has $1,200 on his person. He's wearing a sweater associated with gang culture. He's wearing a hat associated with gang culture. He's caught in a car doing human trafficking. And there's allegations of him beating his wife in 2021. So I don't want that person in my country. I'm just being real. So yeah, he's entitled to due process, but he is not the martyr I would have chosen. K Soko says, I'm sorry, I don't care if people don't like or want him. The government illegally deported a lot of these people and wants to do it to citizens and revoke papers. I'm sorry, we should stand tall for even the lessers of society. Okay, well, I think you're politically inefficacious. I think you need to pick better martyrs. Chenek says, and we can allow 17 Mexican gang members related to the Sinaloa cartel boss. I'm not sure what that's in reference to. Sapien says, if you send someone to prison, there has to be a trial. If there's not a trial, that means there's no due process. If there's no due process, there are no rights. I agree with what you're saying. However, this is an argument of structure, is that he's a citizen of El Salvador. Okay? I'm not saying this is good. I don't think Kilmar Abrego Garcia should be in Sukkot for the rest of his life. I'm saying that Kilmar Abrego Garcia should ultimately probably be deported. So K Soko says, I disagree 100%, and that's fine, I guess. It's okay. K Soko, I know you are very passionate in disagreement with this thing, and I will move on so I do not frustrate you. It's 100% false in this example. All right. I'm going to make a point, and I understand you're getting frustrated, so I will move on momentarily. But I'm going to make this point. Kilmar Abrego Garcia. 1 billion photos. If I keep scrolling, it's still going. There's 1 billion photos. If I go to news, BBC, Wikipedia, CBS, AP, Wall Street Journal, Fox 56, DOJ, ABC. Okay. Andre Hernandez. We get a third of the way down one page, and then it starts being other people. And then if I go to news, Trump admin deports one NBC story or one CBS story, one NBC story, some clips, GLAD, HRC, state member. You can see that, not, in my opinion, based off of what I just showed online, 90% of the media attention has gone to Kilmar Abrego Garcia instead of Andre Hernandez. So in my opinion, liberal sympathetic media would have, I'll try to say it as diplomatically as I can. Liberal and progressive media would have been better served highlighting the case of Andre Hernandez Romero than they would have been highlighting the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. That's my opinion. You don't have to like it. That's my opinion. Possum Nation says, it just optically, it doesn't have to make sense. It's like when Dems focus on trans issues for the election, it's not a winning optic. Yeah, we're talking about optics. We're talking about rhetoric. But no one but Trump and his admin picked them, so please just describe it right. People on the left are standing for a lot of these people. Do you realize Trump picked shit people, so people will claim this? Okay, Soko, I'm going to move on because I know that I'm frustrating you. We have a choice in how we respond, okay? When Trump picks bad hombres to highlight the crimes, we can either spend 90% of our media attention on the people, the bad hombres that he picked, or we can pick the most egregious cases and highlight them. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the reason why that case was selected was because of the lack of due process in reference to his deportation. However, once all that other information found out, the story has lost steam in public consciousness because they say, ultimately, it's a paperwork issue, okay? I think it's a fascistic threat to the due process of the United States of America. I think it's evil to send people to a gulag in Central America. I think that the Trump admin is mustache twirling levels of bad because they're trying to do this to our own citizens. I am with you. I agree. This is evil. It is bad. However, if you want to fight in the realm of politics, you have to consider optics and public perception. Sash picks bad people and we just say, oh, well, fuck our rights. Okay. All right. We'll move on. I'm frustrating you, and I know I'm frustrating you. Not sure if you use this example, but also Parks and meticulously chose person for the bus incident, and it was done on purpose. Yes, Rosa Parks was picked meticulously for optics. They need to pick their own battles, not predictably take the battlefield MAGA wants them to take. Yes, this is intellectual, spiritual, and psychological warfare. So, Soko, you and I agree on the same principles. We are disagreeing on tactics. Okay? But I understand I'm pissing you off, so I'm going to let it go.
I don't really give a shit about like the character of the guy, and I didn't.
You and Adam Conover will probably see more eye to eye.
I think that was a big part of the story. It was like the fact that he did not, receive due process before being, rendered to a prison, like this bizarre prison in El Salvador. Like that's the strange part.
That's
right?
El Salvador's government with an El Salvadoran citizen. That's not our purview.
I mean, he's like sent directly to this like gigantic, complex. It's in
Soko, I do speak to the evil a substantive amount of the time.
Like highly public way, in a way where like the administration, is making a show of their refusal to, follow the law. It's bizarre to witness, and like the sort of narrow legalistic. Oh, he had a hearing. He was da 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 da. It's irrelevant to like the purposeful spectacle of the Trump administration. Sending this guy who they admit they should not have done this, but they're like, we don't give a shit. We're doing it just because we hate guys like this, and we want like even people who are in the country legally to, be afraid and to self-deport.
Yeah.
Like it's.
Soko, you're my favorite one guy. Okay, well, maybe not. Commander Haircut is my favorite one guy, but you're my second favorite one guy. All right, your passion comes through.
It seems like the only justification is purposeful cruelty for doing
I don't think they call on any legal immigrants to self-deport. They're calling on illegal immigrants to self-deport, offering up $1,000 if they do.
The guy had a legal status to be in the country.
He did not.
Legally.
That's not true.
See, in Soko, sorry, I'm not trying to argue with you, but I'm trying to make this point. Adam has taken the surface level story and not dug into it, and now he's going to make simple mistakes that are going to concede the argument to Tim. Yeah. Soko says, love you, Shelly. I was having a liberal moment. Please excuse my outburst. It's okay. We all do.
Holding of deportation isn't legal status.
I thought it was our sponsor of the stream, Grassroots Hegemon, who was your favorite. Well, he's my favorite because he gives me tons of money, but he doesn't one guy me. If anything, I think that him and I have like 80% ideological overlap.
Withholding of deportation means he was ordered to leave the country, but the U.S. was barred from sending him to El Salvador, specifically because Barrios 18 in Guatemala had threatened his family. So the question as to due process was, this is why I think the actual legal standard is called harmless error. If he actually got either USCIS interview as to the withholding of deportation, it would have been voided because El Salvador no longer has the crime rate that it did 12 years ago or 10 years ago. The issue is, are you still at threat from Barrios 18? The answer is no. And so then you're withholding.
Except for they put him in a prison that was filled with Barrios 18.
of deportation is void, we can deport you. The issue is that for deportation of someone like Abrego Garcia, he has a home country, El Salvador. He has a withholding to that, to El Salvador, withholding of deportation because of a gang in another country neighboring El Salvador. We can't deport him to
What's up, Jonah? Good to see you.
Venezuela. We can't deport him to Mexico. That requires treaties. The U.S. doesn't have those, though we do have a treaty with Venezuela, with El Salvador as it pertains to Tren de Aragua. So what ends up happening is he had 2 orders of deportation. He conceded in 2019 through his lawyer that yes, he was here illegally. Yes, he had been found to be here, to be removable under the law, and he requested 3. There's withholding of deportation. There was asylum, and then there was I forgot the third one is it's you can't deport him because of a fear of torture. It's like a UN thing.
And the reason why asylum was rejected was because you have to apply for asylum within 1 year of being in the United States if you're an illegal immigrant. And there are plenty of illegal immigrants who don't apply for asylum because they obviously fear for deportation if they get into the country. As a matter of fact, 95% of the people who apply for asylum in the United States get rejected. So that's why they don't even bother with the application. But he was caught. And so since he was caught, he wanted to do the application to see if he could get it squeaked through.
And they denied 2 of them. Asylum was denied because he didn't apply for it in a timely manner. Deportation to El Salvador was granted because of Barrios 18 in Guatemala. And then the last one was denied because there's no torture provision. The remedy right now would be a Zoom hearing where he gets on a computer, talks to these are executive judges, by the way, and they would just say, withholding denied. Welcome to El Salvador. You're an El Salvador citizen. I think the real issue is, yes, it was an administrative error, shouldn't have happened, but the remedy is a 10-minute Zoom call. If we did that, nothing would change. If he was brought back to the United States, he'd immediately be turned around and sent back because his withholding would be voided. So
how is this something that you're certain? I mean, the man was, did a judge not order the Trump administration not to remove the guy? Like,
I think, well, it was under the first Trump administration. He was granted the withholding. He wasn't supposed to be removed. He got caught up in the sweep, essentially. But again, if the due process due to this man would be a hearing under withholding of deportation.
So is he receiving this due process?
No, I agree. They should do it. I actually asked the secretary, why not just send the US CIS guy down?
So why don't you think they're doing it?
I think there's 2 potentialities. Trump, actually, it's probably more than 2, but Trump doesn't want to look weak. He doesn't want to look like he's going to be pushed around by the judiciary. But I do agree with you.
Otherwise known as following the law.
No, not necessarily. I mean, the universal.
In this case,
no, actually, universal injunctions are unconstitutional.
Guys, you have to understand how this is perceived by a lay audience. Okay, in case Oko, if I trigger you, I'm sorry. But what's happening is Adam is coming on and he's proposing a narrative, which is that Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a man from Maryland, that even if he's a bad guy, he shouldn't have been deported, and the Trump admin violated the law. Now, to you and I, you beautiful dozens of souls who are hanging out with me on your beautiful Friday, thank you kindly for hanging out with me today. The reason why that we know that Tim is getting things wrong is because we've studied the case over the past few weeks, right? Over the past month or 2. All right. But the lay audience doesn't know that. They're getting their information from Tim Pool. And so as a result, when he says, hey, these are all the criminal accusations, this is the violation, they can do a Zoom meeting. There's nobody in this room to push back and say, actually, like, he's being deported to a prison without trial that has the gang members who have threatened to kill him. So that's probably a violation of the stay order. And then also, who says that you can have this level of trial over Zoom call? It might be something that needs to be done physically. So he should be physically extricated to the United States in order to do this. And why are you sympathizing with and making apologia for the Trump admin that is doing authoritarian bullshit, not just with Kilmar Abrego, but also with Andre Hernandez, also with other non-citizens? Also, they're arguing to do it with citizens. This is the kind of thing where, yes, you need to argue for the rights and due process of all human beings, but you also need to understand what the audience is perceiving from this. And right now, what it seems like is Adam doesn't know what he's talking about. Tim is explaining it to him, and Tim is getting easy dunks because Adam is just like every other liberal who doesn't know what they're talking about, jumps into a moral outrage, assumes they're correct, and doesn't understand the facts of the matter. So you have to understand that optically that might not be plain to us, but it is plain to the lay audience. And in particular, it's plain to the conservative audience that way. Sacred Snow says, you have to say that's bad to Trump bringing up Kilmar, but you should not make them the headline if there are other examples who are perfect victims. Well, somebody also said this earlier. They said that you shouldn't center the movement on a single person. And I agree with that. Because if we highlighted Andre Hernandez, if we found another half dozen people who were wrongfully deported or were deported to Saqqat without sufficient evidence to establish that they were gang members, then when they argue that Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a bad guy, you can be like, yeah, he could be a bad guy, but we still need to follow due process. And even if you're making the argument about bad guys, look at Andre Hernandez. He's a homosexual hairdresser from Venezuela who is currently sitting in Guantanamo Bay, El Salvador, despite having no gang affiliations that have been proven at all. So, you know, like that's where I think not centralizing the narrative around a single person is good. The reason why we do that, though, is because obviously when you make it one person, you make it personal. Because when you see so many stories about the same person, it feels real. It feels like somebody you know, right? So there's an argument to be made that you should centralize a character in order to explain the narrative. And then there's arguments for why that's dangerous. And I think this entire political squabble shows why it's dangerous. Gen X says, how would he be sent back to prison and not just deported? It's because of his accusations in El Salvador. You don't have to be a proven gang member convicted of a crime in a court of law. You just have to look like you're a gang member. If you have gang affiliated tattoos or any friends who are gang members, you can end up in Saqqat. They don't have the same standards of due process that we do here, and they also don't have the same crimes. Being accused of being an affiliate of a gang is sufficient to end up in Saqqat. Sacred Snow says Kilmar is not the cause. The cause is due process rights. Kilmar is the wrong figurehead. It should be Andre. Well, I agree. And not just that, it should also be the injustice. We're not just talking about this thing because of due process. We're also talking about injustice. Is it just to take a man who is legitimately fleeing a failed state, because I think that Andre Hernandez Romero is from Venezuela? Is it okay to take a man from a failed state who's a productive member of his community and put him in Guantanamo Bay, despite the fact that he's never been accused of a crime, never been convicted of a crime, and doesn't have any gang affiliations? Is that justice? And the answer is no. Regardless of process, it's still an injustice. K. Soko says, just remember Nazis used to convince people that those in the camps deserve to be there. I'll never fall for that and listen to a governor just write people out of existence. Yeah, sure. I'm with you there. But we should still be horrified about other aspects of the case. It's not just going to Saqqat. It's not just the lack of due process. It's also punishing people for the crime of existence. Gen X says, lol, are they? That was argued to SCOTUS yesterday, and they sure didn't sound like universal injunctions were unconstitutional to them. Tim was so triggered by Sam and Co making fun of his singing. Yeah, well, he's taken psychic damage since, I'll say it. Gen X says, yes, it is absolutely a problem that F-sticks like Tim Pool don't know what they're talking about and are the ones educating the masses. Yes, well, I mean, that's why we do this stream. We do the stream because hopefully we can, both left and right, we can add a level of nuance and understanding to the world that is not common in the media sphere. Now, maybe I don't know what I need to do. Maybe I need to be dumber. Maybe I need to not talk as much. Maybe I just need to sit back and go, huh, that's cool. I don't know what I need to do, but obviously we need to get bigger in order to have an impact. Sapien says, Guantanamo Bay, El Salvador is a great phrase. Keep using it, especially next time you talk to Tim. Yeah, it's Guantanamo Bay. People on the right, some of them probably believe being gay is enough to be sent there. I agree, but that makes them evil. It makes them bad. Did a bunch of innocent moms get deported? Yes. There was a whole bunch of people who had citizen children and they got deported either with or without their children, which are both injustices. Or that one college girl who grew up here and got deported because her family never got their papers. Yeah, not just that. Or the French lady, she was Russian. She was working for Yale or Harvard. She brought in French embryo, or she brought in frog embryos, excuse me. And because she was trying to evade declaring the frog embryos for some kind of research that she was doing, they're thinking about deporting her back to Russia, which is like she's been a critic of the government. So it's effectively I don't want to say it's a death sentence, but it's at minimum like a potential incarceration, if not death. K Soko says, thank you, Shelley. The cause is the cause. Good and bad people will be the face. We have no control over who Trump wants to do with this. The cause is justice. We align on that. Okay. We align on principle. I think we're disagreeing on tactics. And what you're trying to do, which I understand, I just disagree with it, is you're saying that I am conceding the rhetorical game by allowing them to change the framing into, well, Kilmar is a bad guy. Okay. I understand what you're saying. But what I'm trying to say is that when we're playing to an exterior audience of political laymen and normies, and we're playing to conservatives, our argumentation has to be on point, or they will use these rhetorical tactics to rip apart the arguments and then support injustice. So, French, frog, same difference, true. Gen X says, we need to make wild claims. It's just difficult to do that when you have integrity. Yeah, that's my main problem, right? I guess I care about reality. Christian Blair says, gulags as its representative of Russian gulags, which right-wingers hate and think of with communism. I mean, yeah, that's another good one. I like Guantanamo Bay, El Salvador, because it seems like everybody hates the war on terror. And so Guantanamo Bay, El Salvador, it sounds like a hotel chain, which Trump is already in charge of. But then it also brings back the negative associations of the war on terror and the lack of due process for people in Guantanamo Bay. So I think it pisses off liberals in the right way, and it pisses off conservatives in the right way. However, I do think that gulags probably pisses off the right wing appropriately. Gen X says, if the Indian college student Priya is what you meant, a judge just granted her deportation protection today, they try to revoke her over a parking ticket. Yeah, it's evil. It's not justice. It's like proceduralism. It's cruelty masked as justice. The children weren't deported. The mothers chose to bring the children with them. I'm with you, Kingslayer, Damocles, where ultimately the parents have a choice. But just as an example, there was a kid who was a citizen who had cancer and was receiving treatment in the United States. Is she going to get as high a quality of treatment back in Central or South America? Probably not. And so we're effectively giving like a 2-year-old child a guaranteed death sentence because we're not extending like a humanitarian olive branch to this mother and this U.S. citizen. You know, like it or not, the 14th Amendment does extend citizenship to birthright. So that is a 2-year-old with cancer who is a United States citizen, and we just sent her to another country to get less care and presumably die. I think that's evil. Cons don't have a problem with Gitmo. I don't agree. I think the Tim Pool people don't like Guantanamo Bay. Or the GWAT. They have a problem with 20 years of occupation without success. That's an interesting thing. That's an interesting point. All right. Kingslayer, I have a feeling that you're a little bit more hawkish on immigration than I am. I want to conquer the entire Americas. I want Central America and South America to form the. I want there to be a central United States of the Americas, which is like Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, Panama, all that kind of stuff. I want there to be a southern United States of America that includes Brazil, Chile, Argentina, Colombia, all those places, right? And so I want there to be 3 United States of America. And so northern, central, southern. And then I want to create the United States of the Americas, which is effectively our miniaturized version of the United Nations, where we cooperatively work together on economics, security, and culture at that level. And I want to become a continental power. That's what I want to do. Trump wants to expand north, not south. Let's do both. ¿Por qué no los dos? Sorry, we need to get back into the content, but you guys, again, are more smart and more interesting than the people who are in media. Tim does, but his audience doesn't. Yep.
So there's a concern that precedent will be set by Trump adhering to universal injunctions pertaining to the Alien Enemies Act or mass deportation, and he's not going to allow that to happen. So he doesn't want to set a precedent in the future that universal injunctions don't exist anywhere in the Constitution, and we've seen some 40% of all injunctions ever issued in this way against Trump and his administration.
Because Trump does more illegal stuff. Moving on, so I don't yap about it.
He's got more. I believe he has more universal injunctions in the first 4 months than all other presidents ever got.
Because he's done the most illegal shit out of all the presidents ever.
Individually, and that is. I mean, that is unconstitutional. These judges are issuing these mandates which plainly violate their constitutional authority. So the check on that is plainly Trump says, no, I'm not going to adhere to something you can't do.
Right. So this is, again, this is authoritarianism, right? It's like
How's that authoritarian?
Okay, there's a.
Well, I agree. The judges are acting in authoritarian.
Yeah, I mean, it's like he as an executive is trying to destroy the power of the other branches of government by ignoring their authority, by mounting
but they don't have
aggressive legalistic defenses like the ones that you're making in
don't.
order to expand the power of the presidency and be able to act with impunity.
Judges
which is
don't
part
have
of
the
why
authority
he's
to do
sending
that.
them. Sure. I mean, look, I'm not a legal scholar. Generally, I would have said that, presidents, I think, tend to follow judicial orders more than Trump tends to, right?
Let me ask you a question. If a judge ordered you to shoot a man in the head, would that be illegal? I'm using an extreme example
Yes, it would be illegal.
on purpose.
Yeah.
It's obviously no. A judge can't order you to kill somebody. That's crazy. But we're not talking about a judge ordering Trump to kill anybody. We're talking about judges in, I think we're up to like 87 instances, issuing universal mandates across the entire nation based on lawsuits of single individuals. So what, for example, a recent one was the transgender military ban. Donald Trump issued an executive order saying, DSM-5 mental disorder, you are now going to be inadmissible from the armed forces and will be severed unless you are not showing symptoms. A judge ruled from this point forward, the military under Trump must admit all individuals regardless of any mental disorder. The judges only have the authority over the people in their courtroom unless it's a class action lawsuit. Universal injunctions are not constitutional.
Like Brown versus Board of Ed. So you went when a person brings a lawsuit to the government,
country, right?
So a person brings a lawsuit to the government about to a judge or the Supreme Court about a law being unconstitutional, and the ruling should only affect that case. It shouldn't affect
it literally affects
law.
The law. It affects the law.
Uh-huh.
So in the issue of lower courts and this universal injunction.
If you don't mind, I'm going to fast forward a little bit because they're arguing legalism, and I don't think Tim is entirely correct, but I also don't know enough to correct them. Effectively, the law should be changed, is I'm assuming what he just said, and this still looks like explanatory, so I'm going to fast forward another 5 minutes or whatever. But the point is that what Adam said, I think, is a decent objection, which is effectively that if you rule something criminal, non-criminal, whatever in the court, then going forward, that should apply to all people. And he brought up Brown versus Board of Education, which I think was was that segregation? What was that? But effectively, Brown versus Board of Education was universally enforced. Brown versus Board of Education. State-sponsored segregation in public schools unconstitutional, overturning the separate but equal doctrine. Right. So once that ruling was made, it applied outside of the court. So in the same way, if there's something that is ruled in an individual court, it probably applies outside the court. But I mean, you argue that obviously within a court in order to, go with precedent. That's a concept within legal theory. But yeah, I think what Tim said is inaccurate. Christian Blair says they had a problem with him saying that he would rebuild Gaza, not because they hate Israel, ethnic cleansing the place, but because they don't want tax money wasted on any Arabs. Well, I mean, yeah, but there's also a bunch of intervention or anti-interventionists who were pissed off about that. Case Oga says the justices basically said, you're losing all your court battles. Why would you bring this case to us? Lol. That's so based. I'm so happy. Adam is another small face, big forehead. I think he's very big forehead. That's probably why he went with that hairstyle. He should shave. He should pull a Bruce Willis. Soko says, they talk a lot about these nation orders and why the courts are using them in recent years, but they told the admin's lawyers it's because presidents have increasingly been going outside the constitutional remit. Yeah, exactly. Soko, when Tim brings up the fact that, Trump has had more court challenges and injunctions about his presidency than anybody else, then it's like, yeah, no baloney, right? Obviously no baloney, because he's done more illegal shit. Conservative liberalism, so you're trying to suggest that courts occasionally rule on constitutionality of policy and not just case-by-case instances? You're crazy. All right. Sorry, that it seems obvious when you phrase it that way, conservative liberalism, but I'm getting gaslit by Tim Pool, so I gotta check myself every now and then. The court said they do those national rulings because the effect is not named the enjoined in the relief de facto, the court ruling that way. Interesting. Okay, cool. No, I think conservative liberalism said it best. He really did. He summarized it in such a way. I was entertaining Tim's line of argumentation, but as soon as conservative liberalism kind of made it succinct, yeah, that's silly. If a judge makes a ruling in a case about the legality of a process, that's probably going to apply outside of that individual case. I think that's an incorrect assessment of the way the law works. QC John might have a steel man, though. However, it is true, as Tim laid it out, does a judge have the authority to mandate the military take all enlistments regardless of mental health and conditions or illnesses? No, they don't, QC John. And I think the way that you would resolve that issue is if the judge ordered that, you would appeal it, because that's like a nonsensical ruling. The way that my brain is slowly starting to melt throughout that day, the judge, if that's the characterization of what actually happened, indulge me a quick research. Google. Judge says military must take all mental illness. Let's see if Tim's obfuscating what happens. The statement judge says military must take all mental illness is an oversimplification of a complex issue. While the military has a duty to provide mental health care, that's not it. Defenses, lack of mental responsibility, prioritizing, U.S. Army lifts, I guess the transgender military court case ruling. May 6, 2025 effectively allowed the Trump admin to enforce its policy banning transgender individuals from serving in the military. The court lowered a lower court injunction that had blocked the ban, allowing it to take effect while legal challenges. So the question is, what's the lower court ruling? But I don't want to let Tim exaggerate it, because ultimately it was appealed to the Supreme Court and it was struck down. So I'm not going to waste time on that. They followed the process. They figured it out. Kingslayer says, I slightly agree with Tim. These are preliminary injunctions and the injunction should only apply to the circuits that the injunction is being heard in. I don't know. I legitimately don't know. I think I need a JD to understand this. Interesting. Conservative liberalism says, sometimes the game of ping pong happens for sure, but the end result isn't to allow one mentally ill person per court ruling. Yeah. Mentally ill people get checked by other people. Sure. All right. Anyways, I'm going to let this play. I've needed to use the bathroom for like an hour. So I'm going to go hit the head, but I'll be back in 90 seconds.
But there's multiple cases.
If you want to say that,
so the point of this is to frighten people at universities, pro-Palestinian protesters, and that means any protester on the left, of course.
I'm probably going to enjoy that.
Immigrants of all types, including those who are here on legal immigrant visas. Like the details of the individual cases don't matter. They like creating a firestorm around someone who is here legally, creating a huge controversy about them, and then saying, we don't give a fuck. We're going to do whatever we want to these people because we want you to be afraid, right?
But that's not,
and that to me that's an expression of like pure authoritarianism. It's a leveraging of state power to frighten undergroups in society that these people don't like. It's like very straightforward. We can mount as many legal defenses as we want of it and say, blah blah blah, according to this statute or that statute, but the actual action is just designed to frighten people Trump doesn't like. And it's bizarre to see him do it.
Let's say yes, but none of that's illegal. That's all actually codified law that they're allowed to do.
Okay, yeah, sure. It's fucking bullshit. It sucks. It's bad. It's bad for the country. It's bad for the American spirit.
We can talk about a lot of bad things that every administration's done in the past that liberals and Democrats have covered up or participated in or didn't argue against.
Yeah, I guess why. I mean, we're talking about this one currently. It feels disingenuous to talk about one thing the Trump administration is doing because Democrats have done bad things too.
Well, like for instance, Donald Trump, through Marco Rubio specifically, revoking student visas, saying that these individuals represent a threat to our national security by adhering to our enemies. And literally, that's what they're claiming. I think it's ridiculous to claim that a student who's anti-Israel is working with Hamas. That's silly. But that's the argument he's making. And under the INA, he has the authority to do it. So you say, okay, well, when people come in here on student visas, they do sign agreements saying they won't do certain things. They do it. They get kicked out.
So this is okay with you because it's narrowly legal under Marco Rubio's, purview?
I would say what's fine with me is the revocation of a visa for someone who's not a citizen who's here conditionally. Like Mohammed Khalil, who was on a conditional temporary visa.
So
they just say like, well, that's a conditional visa.
I'm going to agree with Tim more than I agree with Adam. So I want to thank chat. I want to thank specifically, there was one that didn't have a tag and there was one that did. I want to thank Katmatbat for their $10 donation via PayPal. And then I also got another $20 donation, but it's in letters that I can't read. So I don't know if that's my friend Khalil from Israel. I don't know if that's my Israeli friend, but thank you for the donations, kings and queens. I sincerely do appreciate it. And then getting into this with Mahmoud Khalil, K-Soko is going to have an aneurysm this stream, but that's okay. I almost have an aneurysm most streams, so I think it's only fair that sometimes you guys take psychic damage. My position on Mahmoud Khalil is that criticizing the state of Israel should not get you deported, and I understand the Trump admin is currently doing that. I think endorsing jihadist organizations 100%, or other terrorist orgs 100% should get your student visa, green card, or whatever revoked. If you endorse the slaughter of civilians intentionally in order to prove a political point, you do not deserve to be a citizen of the United States. You don't deserve to have permanent residency. You don't deserve to have temporary residency. It's a really low bar to ask people to not support murder. And if you support murder, you should not be in my society. That's my perspective. Weld QC says, however, if it is true, as Tim laid it out, does a judge have the authority to mandate the military take all enlistments regardless of mental health conditions? Absolutely not. Then we argued about how the courts ultimately did figure it out. Kingslayer says, if you want an injunction nationwide, you should have to appeal it and blah, blah, blah. Gen X says, the court asked yesterday, what if the feds confiscate everyone's guns? Does every person separately have to file a case, or can one district court enjoin it nationwide? No. Yeah, it depends for what reason, Gen X, right? So if we're talking about like a class of confiscation, let's say that we decided anybody with bipolar disorder no longer had a Second Amendment right. And that was found in a certain case, and they cited some law and it stood the appeals process. Then that could, in my mind, especially if it was at the state level, that could mean that anybody with bipolar disorder could have their guns confiscated for having bipolar disorder. But then what ends up happening is that's a standard, but when you bump into the people who do have those guns, you bump into like HIPAA laws, right? You bump into privacy laws. And so it's almost impossible to enforce. So K-Soko says, oh, they did, Jen. The oral arguments was good yesterday. Can't wait for uncivil law to cover it. Cool. Conservatism says, on the subject of not supporting murder, how do you feel about Syria's new leader who was on the FBI most wanted list a few short months ago with a $5 million bounty on his head? Fluid world. I mean, it is, but this guy, who's the new president of Syria? He used to be like a member of Al-Qaeda, which is really funny. New president of Syria, Ahmed al-Shara, who's now meeting with the president of Trump. What's so funny about this guy is he was raised, I think he might be younger than me. What's his age? He's young, I think. Oh, he's 42. So he's like a few years older than me, okay? Now, Ahmed al-Shara, there's just so funny al-Shara books picture. So I think the narrative of Ahmed al-Shara, now bear in mind, I'm summarizing it from the outside perspective, was that he grew up in war-torn Syria. He joined Al-Qaeda in Iraq and Syria. He was a terrorist, and he did fight. I don't know if he fought coalition forces, but I think he fought against the Syrian government. And he was like a military leader against the Syrian government, or a paramilitary leader. But what ended up happening was, transformed by the people, is that he read like a few liberal books. I hate to say it, but it's true. He read like a few liberal books, and then he, decided that he was going to try to create like a tolerant, semi-democratic, economically liberal, Western-friendly country. And so despite the fact that he was a jihadist, the United States and the Western allies have like embraced him. So it's a really funny like transformation of events where 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we would have been trying to drone strike this guy with every, fiber of our being. And yet now, because he's a liberal economist and he signals that he's going to be liberally tolerant of religious and ethnic minorities in Syria, we're like, yeah, okay, you're based. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of a crazy story. I want to see it develop. They still have militias that are slaughtering each other along ethno-religious lines in Syria. So I'm not saying it's resolved, but I do think it's like a really funny story to effectively have a guy who could have been bin Laden become, Justin Trudeau or Zelensky. I think that's funny. Conservative liberalism says he's rubbing elbows with Trump and Macron. Yeah, exactly. But I am biased because I saw him call for the lynching of a black man on Natalie Lawyer Chick's stream a few years ago. Ooh, that sounds spicy. Just find the picture of him giving Trump a thumbs up. Yeah, I think he fought coalition forces. I wouldn't be surprised. Gen X, my answer would be one from each federal circuit, which is like 13 plaintiffs. If there's a split in the circuits, go to SCOTUS. Kingslayer, I appreciate the enthusiasm with which you're arguing the point that each district should be responsible for its own district. And so if a court is one, and I think procedurally there's a certain amount of intuitive sense that your argument makes. However, I think the courts are already so overwhelmed with cases that if there's something that makes sense, let's say that, I don't know, Ninth Court of Appeals, there's a restaurant that just denies service to a black man, and they serve, they refuse to serve him, and they appeal it under some civil rights law, and the black guy, wins the case, and that individual defendant is ordered to serve black people in their restaurant. In my opinion, that law should apply outside of the circuit. But what can happen is, by default, but what can happen is if somebody thinks that it shouldn't apply outside of the circuit, then they can sue within their circuit. That's the way that I would do it. Otherwise, we're going to drown in paperwork. So procedurally, I see your line of argumentation, but we're already drowning in paperwork. So he might have gotten sick of a lot of the sectarian violence. I think he said as much. I think he said that he's seen how sectarian violence has destroyed Syria, and he doesn't want to contribute to that.
I don't go to Singapore and spit on the ground. I'll get caned.
So sorry. You think what's happened to those
Singapore
students
right
is
now.
like that's okay with you? Not legally. I'm talking about like as an event that occurred in the country. You're like, oh, it's good that happened. It's okay with me. You think it's moral. You think it's right. You think it's just. I'm not talking about legally. I'm talking about like, you said.
Yeah, moral analysis. Adam's actually being more insightful than I gave him credit for.
Hey, you
60%?
don't 60%.
Yeah, like nothing's so easily black and white.
Rebecca Ozturk, who she wrote an op-ed. The only thing that anybody has even claimed that she's done is she wrote an extremely mild op-ed in her campus newspaper, asking that the college like sort of consider being supportive of the Palestinian cause in some vaguely defined way.
Yeah.
Her visa's revoked. She, we've all seen the video, right? People come and like grab her and literally put her into a vehicle.
Was arrested.
They're wearing masks, right? I mean, she's stopped in an alarming way on the street, right?
It's not like they filmed that and published that footage, though. That was security camera footage.
Yeah,
People
but
got a hold.
they did it in if you want a student, like a young woman, there's other ways to arrest them than have 6 people show up wearing masks, surround her in a pincer formation. Like it's designed to create terror. So like what
You don't have to do it that way.
what
Agreed.
okay, great.
They didn't have and Biden's DOJ didn't need to show up at Roger Stone's house at 4 a.m.
Sure. And and you know what? If you want to bring up another example, I'll say I condemn that as well.
Agreed.
If that'll keep us on this topic for a second.
We've had numerous instances across administrations that have acted similarly.
Okay. So let's stay on Rumesa Öztürk. Why do you think that, like, what was the administration's purpose? Not the legal argument for whether they can do it or not.
Israel.
What? Yeah. Okay. So
it's literal Israel. And it's absurd that they'd argue
Yeah, so this is where I'm going to land in the split of this. So having masked non-uniformed people who might pop a badge out of their t-shirt, I don't think is a good like rules of engagement or escalation of force for federal law enforcement. I do understand that it's necessary sometimes, but if we have like a hijabi student from CUNY or whatever university that she went to, I think the chances of her like pulling a gun or fist fighting you or running away are pretty low. And therefore, I think like, you know, having a couple of officers or whatever ready in case it pops off, that's totally fine. But it's a college student, right? Walk up and say, hey, Miss Thing, you know, I've been ordered by the State Department in order to detain you. We need to talk to you about some stuff or whatever. I need you to come with me. And then if she's just like, why? Then at that point you go hands on, but you need 2 or 3 officers, not 6. Now, maybe they're bored. Maybe, you know, that's why there's so many officers. Maybe they don't have like the same level of body cameras that regular law enforcement have. I don't know what the problems are. I get that the aesthetics are skeevy, but you also need to be pragmatic as well. That being said, I do think it's wrong because I know K-Soko is probably ready to fire off a chat here. I do think it's wrong that she's nabbed for writing what's being characterized as a mild op-ed of Israel. Matter of fact, let's do a little liberal fact checking right now. So, woman detained for writing op-ed pro-Palestine. So, Rumesa Öztürk. So, Rumesa Öztürk op-ed. Let's see if she endorses terrorism in her op-ed. If she doesn't, then I don't think she should be detained or her thing should be... I don't think she should be detained or have her green card revoked. Plain clothes, protecting students from journalism, ordered free on bail, journey from scholar, try again. Here's the op-ed that got... Here we go. Here's the op-ed, Tufts Daily. Okay, I'm actually going to read this because I actually do think this is interesting and we should know about it. So let's know about it. On March 4th, the Tufts Community Union Senate passed 3 out of 4 resolutions demanding that the university acknowledge the Palestinian genocide, apologize for university president Sunil Kumar's statements, disclose... What? Sunil Kumar's statements? Listen, I'll fight for your free speech, but if you're going to be... Sumar statement on Israel. Sorry, who is it? Sunil Kumar statement on Israel. Campus climate student activism. All right, so let's see what they stated as well. These resolutions were the product of meaningful debate by the Senate and represent a sincere effort to hold Israel accountable for clear violations of international law. Credible accusations against Israel include accounts of deliberate starvation, indiscriminate slaughter of Palestinian civilians, and plausible genocide. Unfortunately, the university's response to the Senate resolutions has been wholly inadequate and dismissive of the Senate, the collective voice of the student body. Graduate Students for Palestine joins Tufts Students for Justice and University, the Tufts Faculty and Staff Coalition for Ceasefire, and Fletcher Student for Palestine to reject the university's response. Although graduate students were not allowed by the university into the Senate meeting, which lasted for almost 8 hours, our presence on campus and financial entanglement with the university via tuition payments and the graduate work that we do on grants and research makes us direct stakeholders in the university's stance. While an argument may be made that the university should not take political stances and should focus on research and intellectual exchange, the automatic rejection, dismissive nature, and condescending tone in the university statement have caused us to question whether the university is indeed taking a stand against its own declared commitments to free speech, assembly, and democratic expression. I don't see any endorsements of terrorism. I see her saying that the university isn't being outspoken enough. Kumar publicly addresses campus climate, student activism via a video message emailed Last semester, the Daily also received and published several op-eds from current students, professors, and alumni reflecting pro-Israeli perspectives. It is possible to denounce terrorist attacks on innocent civilians in Israel and to acknowledge and speak out against the suffering and loss of innocent Palestinian civilian life in Gaza, Kumar said in the video. It is possible to be sympathetic to the humanitarian need of the Palestinian people while still demanding the return of Israeli hostages, and it is possible to be supportive of the self-determination rights of both Israelis and Palestinians without coming across as somehow being blindly supportive of violence. Okay, so it sounds like the Sunil Kumar was being centristy and probably agrees with me, and a pro-Palestine student criticized them. I don't think that's grounds for deportation. I've said it before, I'll say it again. My grounds for deportation is endorsing criminal violence against civilians. Conservative liberalism says comparing Roger Stone to a college girl who co-wrote an op-ed is wild, but intimidation tactics in general are pretty illiberal. Yeah, I do think it's conflation, but I think that Adam is just going to concede for the sake of the argument. I just usually ask why cops don't do shirtless calendars like firefighters, because we're not as hot as firefighters. Firefighters, Death Lily, firefighters get to chill in a fire station and go out to 1 to 2 calls per shift, and they get to work out the rest of the time if they so feel like it, or they get to cook food and chill in the firehouse. As a matter of fact, if my kids ask to be first responders, I'm going to tell them to be firefighters. The training is hardcore. What the job actually demands of you when you do a real call is hardcore. The pay to play ratio is excellent if you're a bum. If you want to work out, listen to podcasts, hang out with your friends, cook good food, all that kind of bullshit, being a fireman in a slow city is awesome. Whereas being a cop, you're in your patrol car, all 12 hours of your shift, driving around trying to make sure that people aren't getting, robbed, murdered, burglarized. Kingslayer says, K-Soko, follow the 2A rights now. There are some circuits, finds magazines aren't protected under the 2A. Some are should and overrule the not going to until they get to SCOTUS. You guys are still arguing about proceduralism, which is fine. Bud123 says, if you criticize Israel war in Gaza and Hamas for terrorism and taking hostages, you are still anti-Semitic and the Trump admin will deport you. It's true. The death of nuance is a very real thing in modern media. Death Lily says, it's a Nazi joke, lol. Is it? Why don't? Oh, because they have tattoos. They have Nazi tattoos under their shirts. I didn't meet any Nazis. There was one Lake County Sheriff's Office guy who was 100% racist as hell. Like super racist. But I doubt he had Nazi tattoos. All right. Anyways.
What they're doing when it comes to these students is they're saying they're a threat to our national security. Mm-hmm. And that's, I mean, do you
think she was a threat to the national security?
It's technically the truth, which is the best kind of the truth, in that, yes, opposing U.S. alliance with Israel is bad. Rallying in any meaningful way students to oppose Israel is bad for the U.S. foreign policy. But come on. You know what I mean? Like a woman writing an op-ed that's not from here is nothing compared to the people from here writing the same op-eds. What they're doing is they're basically saying I agree with you in that they're saying, do not do these things or we will deport you. We will find the thinnest of hairs of a reason to revoke your visa if you come out against us. I'm not completely in disagreement. So the reason why I say 60% when you asked me if I thought it was morally right is because obviously they don't need 6 guys swarming her in a pincer formation. One guy could have knocked on her door and said, ma'am, your visa has been revoked. I'm going to need you to come with me. We've got a black SUV you can sit in. We're going to deal with this in a rather kind of boring way. They didn't need to do that. The claim about a threat to our national security is grossly overestimated. The claim that these people have adhered to Hamas is grossly overestimated. That being said, it is still completely legal in that an individual who comes here on a conditional visa not violate the conditions of that visa.
Sure.
So it's
legal. No. But dude, I'm asking you, like, do you think it's good for America that like college students who are here on a student visa because of political speech are being thrown into vans and having legal things be done? Sure, it's narrowly legal, but like, torture. They're being sent home. She's being put in a prison and then she's being like forcibly deported. Do you think that's good for America? Like this is okay. So
stop talking. Let him answer that.
You think because of political speech are being thrown into vans and having legal things be done? Sure, it's narrowly legal, but like torture. They're being sent home. being put in a prison, and then she's being like forcibly deported. Do you think that's good for America? Like, this is okay. So
marginally.
What do you think is good, even marginally? Like, what's the minor small benefit to America?
Do not come to our country and rally against it and its interests.
Oh, damn. Tim is really stretching the fabric of what it means to be like a conservatarian, man. Like, I get it. And what's funny is we're aligning more than we should, I guess. Conservative liberalism says, I'd easily argue not challenging conventional wisdom with reference to military alliances is a greater threat to national security than just nodding along with whatever the current admin is doing. It's un-American too. Yeah, and so that's the thing. Like, when we think about what is America, what makes the United States of America good, typically it has something to do with our Constitution and our rights and our freedoms and all that kind of stuff. So it's freedom of speech and freedom of conscience. And so, he's saying that it's marginally bad for the United States of America to be policing the thought crimes of its students. And the marginal good that he describes is funny. It's something that I would say, where he's like, yeah, like, don't come to the United States and, piss and moan about it. It's a privilege, not a right. That's fine. I agree with that. But I do think that you should have maximal free speech, right? So if you endorse criminal behavior and you're here as a guest, then yeah, like, you're endorsing criminal behavior. We don't want you here. However, if you're just saying from a geopolitical analytical situation, the Israel-Palestine conflict is bad and the Palestinians are getting screwed over by Israel, I don't think that's a deportable offense. And I think that's crazy. So I kind of like meme in the authoritarian category. And I think that Tim is actually buying into it a little bit, which is crazy. This is the death of free speech. No, it's not. I could say whatever I want right now. You could say whatever you want right now. Bud123, say slurs in chat. I won't ban you. Not only will I not ban you, you can say slurs about the president of the United States and law enforcement isn't going to do anything about it. This is not the death of free speech. I am allowed to talk about whatever concept I want to. We could go back and have a destiny moment and talk about like crazy sex stuff. We can talk about politics. We can talk about geopolitics. We can talk about economics. We can talk about this. We can talk about that. This is not the death of free speech. This is an anti-American infringement on free speech that is hurting guests within our country. 86 Romaine, exactly. 8647. Dude, and they can be like, oh, you're threatening the president. It's like, no. When I was in the restaurant industry, that's probably what spawned that restaurant rant earlier, by the way. Calling 86 is when you're saying you're out of something. So, yeah. The wild part of me is that Rumesia expressed empathy for both sides in some of her articles. So the idea that she was a radical terrorist is wild to me. I think it's incorrect. I think it's fundamentally incorrect. She came at the conversation with a bias. We all have biases, but she showed sufficient nuance that her speech should be welcome in the United States of America. So the fact that they detained her and punished her, I do think is evil. It's evil. Tim is playing with fire, but he's burning down the house instead of building something to keep you warm.
I apply this too.
So what is the U.S. interest that her writing an op-ed?
Suez Canal.
The Suez Canal?
Right. The United States, the reason why the U.S. is so, I love these Jews people that are like, Israel controls the foreign policy. Oh, shut up. The U.S. interest with Israel, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia has a lot to do with like the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. This is why Donald Trump is obsessed with Panama and Greenland. He wants to control the global trade routes. This is what America's largely done. That's why I say it's a gross mischaracterization to claim that an op-ed is a threat to national security, in that it is, in the smallest of senses. Students coming here and telling us to oppose our support with Israel puts us at risk in terms of the sentiment of a younger generation as to whether or not we'll fund Israel and control the Suez Canal.
But I asked you if you thought it was good to deport her.
I said marginally. Right,
because we have national interests in the Suez Canal,
No,
and
that's
she
the,
wrote
that's
an
the
op-ed.
U.S.'s interest.
Okay, so why do you think it was good to deport her?
Asserting U.S. sovereignty. Do not come to our country and tell us what to do. You've got a condition of your visa. You're a guest in this country.
Okay.
Adhere to the agreements we have.
So you think that America should be a country where if you come here on
Tim the liberal is more of an authoritarian than me. Good God. That's funny. That's actually crazy pants.
a student visa, you're paying into our, university system, you're coming here for the reasons that, completely legally, we've invited you to come, right?
Yes.
This is why America is the country it is, partially because people like this have come for decades. If you express a political opinion that is like mildly at odds with a U.S. interest in another country of a canal, that you should be deported. You think America should be the kind of country where if somebody comes here, they write an op-ed that says literally anything about U.S. foreign policy, they should be deported. So going forward, literally everyone in the world should know if you are on foot on U.S. soil, you should not say anything in public about U.S. national priorities of any kind, or else you could be deported. You think it's good to have a country where that's the understanding?
All right. So you're saying that
this is what I'm trying to drill down to.
The individuals who come to this country and apply for student visa.
I'm sorry. I'm playing like a little gamey game on my phone that's time sensitive, but Adam's conscience is so shocked by an illiberal perspective that he's having difficulty processing it. It's pretty funny. Yeah. I don't know if he's being edgy or what, or if he's just like sick of liberals and progressives, so he's just ready to go scorched earth. I have no idea where this is coming from for Tim. I do think it's a little funny. You guys are still talking about Second Amendment and proceduralism. Mr. Bombastic says, me visiting America, the U.S. is a great country, great foreign policy. God bless Donald Trump. Yeah, exactly. Like that's what he's saying is when you come here, you just kind of have to suck up to the United States. And then when you leave, you can talk shit. I think that's pretty funny, actually.
Jesus have made that agreement already. So while I would argue the deportation of Romesa is the thinnest of hairs, Mahmoud Khalil makes more sense. I mean, he organized and helped lead protests that resulted in damage, occupations of buildings, several staff at the University of Columbia.
Let's stay on Romesa because then we don't have to split hairs.
Right. The issue is do not come to our country and tell us what to do. That's it. If you're here as a guest of this nation, you do not start rallying its people in opposition to the will of the voters and what the government is doing.
I mean, I really thought the point of America was, freedom of speech was like a main value here. That I think that's why people come here. It's why I like living here, because I always felt that, hey, I can express an opinion, especially about U.S. foreign policy, and not have anything happen to me. So that's a right that only citizens have. And you think America should be a country where if you are not literally an American citizen, if you express any opinion about U.S. foreign policy, I mean, and we both agree the opinion she expressed was pretty mild. It wasn't like a very inflammatory opinion, right? It was like, it's pretty mainstream political opinion to have. It conflicts with U.S. interests about the Suez Canal. I still don't really understand that point, but
yeah, and Adam is equally confused as compared to some people in chat as well. Conservative liberalism says, if the Suez is so important for NatSec, the solution isn't to deport people critical of Israel. Have a public conversation about the Suez Canal. For sure. And then Liz following up says, Egypt controls Suez. Yeah. So I mean, having our back door, it's geopolitics time, fellas and ladies. So having our back door in Israel is good because let's do this. If Israel is our ally, I showed you guys a map the other day of oil, and it's like a third of the world's proven oil reserves are right here. Israel is right here. Okay. They almost share a border. The only reason why they don't share a border is because of this little waterway and because of the country of Jordan. Otherwise, Saudi Arabia and Israel would share a border. So if Saudi Arabia ever tells us to pound sand, then we always have a backdoor through Israel. If Egypt ever tells us to pound sand, then we have a backdoor via Israel. Iran is hostile to us. They have another third of the world's proven oil reserves. And then looking in here, the Suez I don't know if it's south of Port Said. I assume it has to be here. This looks like the Suez, right? So it's this beautiful, honestly, one of the most beautiful human constructions ever. But it's a canal that allows like 30% of world trade or 40% of world trade, especially Eurasian world trade, to travel through this strait. It's one of the most geopolitically important places on the planet. And Israel used to control the Sinai. Believe it or not, Egypt fought a war with Israel, and Israel controlled this entire military territory. They weren't able to defend it, so they gave it back. But I do think it's, you know, it's interesting that they are so close. So I think Tim is making a little bit of a geopolitical jump, saying that we're friends with Israel because we need to be close to the canal. We're also friends with Egypt. So, you know, we have a motivation to be there. I agree with that. It probably factors into our calculation, but I don't think that's like the biggest thing. Israel, in my opinion, the reason why we're more friends with them is because there's like a historical narrative about the genocide of Jews during World War II that we probably feel a little bit guilty for because Europe did it and we ignored it. So we probably have some historical guilt associated with Israel. But then also they are Jews, God bless them, Israeli Jews, are very smart and also have some of the most advanced like semiconductor and chip manufacturing plants on the planet. Like IBM has a huge manufacturing center in Israel. So, you know, it's not just geography. Is freedom of speech in the US only for citizens or for all people? It's arguable. So if you look at the First Amendment, it does say all people, like Congress can pass no laws abridging the freedom of speech of people within the United States. And so in that regard, it applies to everyone within the United States. However, it's not a absolute right. So there are conditions on green cards and visas and being an alien where if you endorse terrorism, we can 100% kick you out. There's written law that if you support or endorse terrorism, you can get kicked out of the country. So, yeah. All right. Anyways, sorry. Just wanted to do some geopol. You guys know me. I love geopol.
Let's just say that it does.
It does.
That should be grounds for being forcibly removed from the country. And like, whether or not it's legally the case that we
He's
could
asked the
do
same
that,
question like
do
4
you
times.
think
He's
it's
just in
good-
shock about it.
You think it's
I said
good
yes.
to have a country where things like that happen? You think
Yes.
a thriving country
Uh-huh.
is one where people come into the country, they write an op-ed for the paper of the organization of which they're a member. She's paying tuition to go to this school, and she's working for the student newspaper or whatever. She's writing an op-ed. She's probably not employed there, but she's writing for the student newspaper, and that is grounds to be deported. And
Always was. I mean, so my attitude.
you think that's the kind of country America is?
always has been. That's why
I guess that's where we fundamentally disagree.
But hold on, the Immigration and Naturalization Act has multiple provisions that outright say this is the case, and so that's why I say it's marginally good, because the issue is the U.S. asserting its sovereignty and saying, as a guest in this nation, we ask you not do certain things.
We ask you don't write we ask you don't write mildly worded op-eds about U.S. foreign policy vis-a-vis a different country's war.
Let's not load it. Let's say, do not speak out against our foreign policy.
So, okay, great. So America is a country where, if you, in your view, if you are a foreign national, you are here on a student visa, you've been invited to the country,
this like 4 times,
you should not.
every time.
Okay.
Tim pointed out correctly that he's asked this 4 times. I think he's just in shock because he's outside of a liberal bubble. Like I'm actually not trying to. I'm more with Adam than I am with Tim in this. I think Tim's being an authoritarian jerk. You know, I have authoritarian instincts as well sometimes, but I think he's being an a-hole. But it is funny that Adam is so in shock at an illiberal opinion that he is incapable of processing it mentally. I think that's actually funny. K Soko says, I doubt any Supreme Court is rolling back 100 years of gun regulation because of states' rights to regulate them as well. Interesting. Liz following up says, they are useful for listening posts to broad regions. True. I'm sure our security apparatus probably does have a large wing in Israel. That's probably an excellent point. We became a world power because we told Britain and France to F off with the Suez Canal in 57. We were little bro before then. True. except more than 80% of the Republican Party agrees with Tim. Yeah, I don't know about percentages. The one that I saw was 55% of the Republican Party, Trump is their first choice. So I agree with you that there's a MAGA component, and not just that, but I agree to a certain extent. I don't think that you should be here to talk smack about us if you're here for a limited thing. Like, so for instance, let's say I'm interested in going to Egypt. I want to be an archaeologist, right? And so I'm going to Egypt in order to study Egyptology. I'm actually, dusting off the pyramids and exploring the caverns and all that kind of stuff. And then, I don't know, something happens bad with Israel. And then I write that the Egyptian government is doing bad things in reference to Israel. I fully expect and think it's reasonable for Egypt to tell me to pound sand. Now, America is the heart of freedom of conscience, freedom of speech, right to keep and bear arms, limited government, et cetera, et cetera. So we should hold ourselves to a higher standard than Egypt. However, I don't think that that's one of the strengths of our country, but it's not like a required strength. It's not something that's central to our character. It's definitely a part of our character, but I don't think that makes us like Nazi Germany. It's like maybe a limited amount of hypocrisy. I mean, if a state wanted to be gun ownership to militia service, could they? Reading the text, it speaks only to militias. No, it doesn't. Lol. Definitely 76 says the ultimate counter argument is to ask him about what if he feels the same thing about birthright citizenship if that didn't exist. Yeah, and then you get into the actual slippery slope of a liberal bullshit. So hold on, I'm going to show you this real quick, Soko. I know that I have been frustrating you today, but I am going to continue to do so because it's funny. So my apologies. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of, does it say the militia? It doesn't. It says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The clause is not referencing the militia. And then also militia is defined in federal code as the irregular militia, which is, I think it's like men 18 to 45 and women in the National Guard. That's the men, the men between 18 and 45. Yeah, that's the irregular militia. And then the states have like formal militias, which are the National Guard, right? So that's where it's not the militia that is being granted the right to keep and bear arms. It is the people. And if you look at historical texts that are contemporaneous with when this was written, they argue that people should have an independent ability to get weapons separate from the government. So, does Colombia versus Heller bind other dates, or did that just tell DC it had to modify its restrictions? No idea. Is Kanye West a Nazi with his HH song? Probably not. He's probably a schizophrenic. Anyways, Chase says, I honestly think Tim Pool is cool with us looking like Nazi Germany as long as he is on the right team. I'm wondering how much of this is grifting to like Sargon of Akkad and Richard Spencer and the Groypers and all that kind of stuff, where he says like occasionally like freaky authoritarian things just so he can be cool with the young kids who don't like liberalism. I actually wonder how much of that it is.
I just want to. It's fair. To me, Tim, it's a very baffling position.
Listen, you're arguing that I should call for illegal activities.
Let me put.
Let me phrase it this way.
Sure.
My attitude is, Congress has passed a law. It was passed in the House and the Senate, signed by the president and upheld by the courts. This law states it is the purview of the Secretary of State to make the decisions as to whether or not these visas can stand for a variety of reasons. I say it is marginally good. Her opinion was mild, and I don't think it. I think it's silly to claim that she's adhering to Hamas.
I see militia there. Soko, don't one guy me. Don't one guy me. You see militia there. You know how you studied English, right? You studied English with clauses and verbs and adverbs. People compose a militia. Yeah. I don't know if you're arguing with me or against me. I really don't. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of who The people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This is the operative clause is people. This is the subject. These are the verbs, adverbs, and all that kind of stuff that are operating with the subject. Whereas this first clause, all of the adverbs are relating to this subject, the well-regulated militia. Yeah, bro. So I don't know what else you're saying, but it's pretty clear that if you understand sentence structure, this is the subject, these are the verbs and adverbs and adjectives, and then this is the subject, and then these are the verbs, adverbs, and whatever other parts of speech. So, yeah. A free state cannot exist by definition if the state is the only one who can hand out guns. Yeah, exactly. Kay says, Kanye is about to be 48. This looks like the last gaps of relevance to me. It could be. Although I do think he's legitimately schizophrenic sometimes based off of his social media posts. All right. Anyways, you guys are arguing about gun rights. I'm paying attention to deportations. Have fun arguing about gun rights. I'm going to continue to listen to Tim and Adam crossover fight about this.
Because an anti-Israel position. My point is, for the government to assert its authority under the law as codified by Congress, the president, and the courts is marginally good. Marginally is, I said 60% maybe. If I was president, I wouldn't do it. But the idea that our country asserts its authority to say, you are guests in this country and we will make the determination whether you can stay or not is a normal process. And to argue that the government should not assert its authority when it feels it should, I think is silly.
I'm still looking.
There's a world we want to live in, and then I'll put it this way. I think people have a right to keep and bear nuclear weapons. The founding fathers were clear in their intent on the right to bear arms, which included privateers clearly.
I'm still looking.
There's a world we want to live in, and then I'll put it this way. I think people have a right to keep and bear nuclear weapons. The founding fathers were clear in their intent on the right to bear arms, which included privateers with grape shot. Now we've changed that and said only large corporations that the government approves of can have nuclear weapons. Agreed. Nobody should have nuclear weapons. My point is that if you want to change the law, you have to do it through the constitutional process, and that adhering to that is typically a good thing.
Okay. So I think he said, because he said something very dumb, and then he said something that's a little different, is he said, I think that people should be able to keep nuclear weapons. Now, that sounds like a moral evaluation, but I think he's making a legalistic evaluation that based off of the Constitution as written and intended by the founding fathers, private persons could keep military weapons, and nuclear weapons are the ultimate extension of that. And he says that if you want to change that conceptually within the country, you should amend the Constitution of the United States rather than just inferring a bunch of like reasonable limits to the law based off of your like subjective analysis, right? I understand that as a steelman of his position. However, I also would be prepared, because it seems like Tim is just saying crazy stuff to piss off Adam Conover. I would also be prepared for him to be like, no, I actually think it would be a good thing, you know? Oh, yeah. Very silly. Very silly. How are you missing that? We can regulate the militia. Regulated. How are you missing that? I hate this case, Oko. It's okay. We'll do it. Gun site well regulated. You're not going to like what I say, Kesoko. You're not going to like. You're not going to like it. So actually, I'm actually not going to read this all to you. I'm going to give it to you. Here we go. Find the well-regulated component. Well-regulated does not mean you're not right. You're incorrect. Here's a website. It goes through half a dozen to a dozen examples right here that the well-regulated component has a bunch of historical examples that does not mean legalism it means like well-trained, operating like a clock. That's what it means. So I've already read this thing a few times. Gun site, well-regulated meaning. That website has a subcomponent that talks exclusively about a well-regulated militia. And it means like discipline. It means organization. So no, it does not mean well-regulated. They use it, they use it in the context of Native Americans that they're fighting. They're saying, we're going up against these Native Americans and they're well-regulated. They obviously do not mean that the Native Americans are under the jurisdiction of the United States and they're being well regulated by the federal government. They means that they're well organized and they're good at what they do. Okay. So it was from gunsite.com. I don't know if they keep it judicial interpretation, the right to self-defense, antebellum state cases, slavery and Dred and Scott Acts, firearms and abolition, the 14th Amendment, anti-KKK, civil rights. So I'll see if I can find Indian and see if I can pop it up. But on this website, they used to have like half a dozen examples of the term well-regulated, and it was related to being well-trained. Anyways, I'm just going to move on.
I don't know how we got on nuclear weapons.
It's a point about process of law.
Yeah,
and saying the government has a right to do something. So if they choose to do it, okay. If you have a problem with it, then Congress should repeal those, specifically amend the INA to remove those provisions. It is completely legal under the United States at the will of the American people that this happen. You don't like that it's happening now, but this was the will of the voters and Congress, and it's been law for like 50 years.
Dude, just because something is legal doesn't mean it's right.
Correct.
Right?
We should change it then. So my point is upholding the law is marginally good. Sometimes the law is bad, and that's why it's not always good. In this regard.
So wait, you're saying simply the fact that Marco Rubio exercised his legal authority to do something was good. It's like he had the legal authority to do it. He could have enforced this law as he saw it on anybody. He could have enforced it on a comedian, right? Who's in town and goes on stage and says,
all right, you guys keep talking about guns, so I'm going to talk about guns too, okay? We're going to read Federalist 29 together. The power of regulating the militia and of commanding in services in time of insurrection and invasion are natural incidents to the duties of superintending the common defense and of watching over the internal peace of the Confederacy. It requires no skill in the science of war to discern that uniformity in the organization and discipline of the militia would be attended with the most beneficial effects whenever they were called into service for the public defense. It would enable them to discharge the duties of the camp and of the field with mutual intelligence and concert and advantage of peculiar moment in the operations of an army, and it would fit them much more sooner to acquire the degree of proficiency in military functions which would be essential in their usefulness. This desirable uniformity can only be accomplished by confiding the regulation of the militia to the direction of the national authority. It is therefore with the most evident property that the plan of the convention proposes to empower the Union to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and authority of the training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say that this leans more towards Kay Soko, where these opening paragraphs are talking about the federal government organizing the militia. So let's see if it says anything else. Of the different grounds which have been taken in opposition to the plan of the convention, there is none that was so little to have been expected or so untenable in it itself as the one from which the particular provision has been attacked. If a well-regulated militia being the most natural defense of a free country, it ought certainly be under the regulation and at the disposal of that body which is constituted the guardian of the national security. If standing armies are dangerous to liberty, an efficacious power over the militia in the body to whose care the protection of the state is committed ought as far as possible to take away the inducement of the pretext to such unfriendly institutions. So they're arguing that a standing army, which we've had for a long time, is a threat to freedom. If the federal government can command the aid of the militia in those emergencies which call for the military arm in support of the civil magistrate, it can be better dispensable with the employment of a different kind of force. If it cannot avail itself of the former, it will be obliged to recur to the latter. To render an army unnecessary will be a more certain method of preventing its existence than 1,000 prohibitions upon paper. Okay, so effectively what they're saying is the militia should fall under the command of Congress because it's a necessary prerequisite in order to avoid a standing army. Now, that being said, I think that's a 200-year-old argument, so let's see how it plays out. In order to cast an odium upon the power of calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, it has been remarked that there is nowhere any provision in the proposed Constitution for calling out the posse comitatus to assist the magistrate in the execution of duty, whether it has been inferred that military force was intended to be only auxiliary. There's a striking coherence in the objections which have appeared, and sometimes even from the same quarter, not much calculated to inspire a very favorable opinion of the sincerity or fair dealing of the authors. The same persons who tell us in one breath that the powers of the federal government will be despotic and unlimited inform us in the next that it is not the authority sufficient even to call out the posse comitatus. The latter, fortunately, is as much of the truth as the former exceeds it. Dude, they are so wordy. These guys are a bunch of nerds. I'm a nerd, and this is very nerdy. It would be as absurd to doubt that a right to pass all laws necessary and proper to... Oh my God, dude, get to well-regulated. Ugh, sorry. Whoever wrote this is frustrating me. The project of disciplining all the militia of the United States is as futile as it would be injurious. If it were capable of being carried into execution, a tolerable expertness in military movements is a business that requires time and practice. It is not a day or even a week that will suffice for the attainment of it. To oblige the great body of the yeomanry and of the classes of citizens to be under arms for the purpose of going through military exercises and evolutions as often might be necessary to acquire the degree of perfection which would entitle them to the character of a well-regulated militia would be a real grievance to the people and a serious public inconvenience and loss. It would form an annual deduction from the productive labor. Dude, right here. They're arguing that they should not force it to be like federally compelled because it would distract the yeomanry, the average citizens, from their normal duties, like working. Would not fall short of the whole expense of the civil establishments of all the United States. It'll also cost a shitload of money. To attempt a thing that would abridge the massive labor and industry to so considerable an extent would be unwise, and the experiment, if made, would not succeed because it would not be long endured. Little more can reasonably be aimed at with the respect of the people at large than to have them properly armed and equipped. Ooh, right here. Little more can be reasonably aimed at with respect to the people at large than to have them properly armed and equipped, and in order to see that it is not to be neglected, it will be necessary to assemble them once or twice in the course of a year. Okay, let's read this. There is something so far-fetched and so extravagant in the idea of danger to liberty from the militia that one is at a loss whether to treat it with gravity or with raillery, whether to consider it as a mere trial of skill, like the paradoxes of rhetoricians, blah, 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 blah. All right. What reasonable cause of apprehension can be inferred from a power in the Union to prescribe regulations from the militia and to command its services when necessary, while the particular states are to have the... Yeah, regulations is actually being used as training right here. I don't even think this is being used in the context of laws. I think this is being used in the context of training. What reasonable cause of apprehension can be inferred from a power in the Union to prescribe regulations for the militia and to command its services when necessary, while the particular states are to have the sole and exclusive appointment of the officers? If it were possible, serious indulge a jealousy of the militia upon any conceivable. So anyways, I think that this is a... Interestingly enough, I think that Keisoko has a stronger argument where they are effectively trying to hybridize the military establishment. They're saying that they don't want a standing army at all, and so they want private people to be the militia and to keep the weapons and arms. But what they say is that the officers of the formal militia will be responsible to this, or will be appointed by the states. And so I almost feel like in our modern context, the formal militia would, of course, be the National Guard, and the informal militia would be the just the citizenry, the yeomanry. Now, that being said, I think that you can regulate in the modern context. You can make laws regarding the limits of the, what would you call it? The unorganized militia, the lay militia. However, I do think that there's an interesting argument here that they're effectively saying, like, they don't see a difference between state appointed officers of the militia versus the body politic, which I think is something from historical context. So Congress has regulation of the militias. Well, I think in that context, it was used for training. But I do actually, Kesoko. So I'm going to try to extend you an olive branch while we're discussing this. So I think in the context, if you look at the way the sentence is structured, they're talking about how Congress should not prescribe the training regimen of the militia, and that should fall to individuals. But I do think that they say the appointment of officers of the militia is going to fall to the states. And so they're kind of deferring judgment to the states to regulate who does what in the militia. It's very interesting. Kesoko says, but to be clear, they are saying Congress retains the right to regulate militias properly armed, meaning, no, they're actually saying the opposite, unfortunately, trying to say. But to be clear, they are saying Congress retains the right to regulate militias properly armed, meaning no, you're still using it in the context of passing laws. That's not how they're using it. They're using it in the context of training. Not that I don't enjoy a good 2A discussion, but we need to get back to the content. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. But are you seriously trying to say the government can't regulate militias? Yes, and they want to regulate that. Dude, we're using a term and we're using them interchangeably in two different things. Okay, I'm going to make this point and then I'm going to move on. Federalist 29, in my cursory interpretation, is saying that the founding fathers did not believe that it was reasonable to compel the vast civilian population to participate in what is effectively modern National Guard service. They don't think that's possible, but they still think that it's necessary for the unregulated militia to have that level of proficiency. And so there was a paragraph there where they said people should effectively have the rights to their own weapons and training and all that kind of stuff. But to your point, they are saying that officers should be appointed by the states. And to me, that seems like it opens up the door where the states are able to discern how the private citizenry is capable of getting trained in and structured in the training of maintaining a militia. Now, that being said, going back to the text of the Second Amendment, I'm still going to insist that a well-regulated militia means a body of well-trained people. Okay? Right to regulate the militia just means National Guards? No. No, it doesn't. I'm being unclear, and that's my fault. So you can regulate guns to any potential military member? No, that's not what I'm saying. Anyways, let's Christian Blaris is right. I love the Second Amendment. I love guns, but I am letting Adam Conover get away from me because he has pretended to be shocked by Tim Pool for the past 20 minutes and actually hasn't made points. He's just asked repeatedly, Tim Pool, you believe in illiberal things? And Tim Pool's like, yeah, and?
Hey, you know what? I disagree with this or that. Or hey, I just did shows in
Canada.
I just did what?
You're not from Canada.
No, but I just did shows in the UK and Amsterdam, and I made fun of UK politics, made fun of American politics.
You wouldn't dare make fun of Islam, though. Go to the UK and mock Islam. Do it.
Well, I don't have any jokes about Islam.
They clipped this in order to make it look like they were having a contextual conversation about comedy, and this did come out of nowhere. He was just talking about, look how smug he is. Look how smug and happy Tim is. This is the other sleep paralysis demon. So earlier, we were watching Ezra Klein, and this was the first sleep paralysis demon where if you criticize, what is it? If you criticize, God, what's the word? Abundance liberalism, then that sleep demon shows up. And then here's the other sleep demon. If you criticize Trump, then this is the other sleep demon that shows up. All right, sorry.
You're not from Canada.
No, but I just did shows in the UK and Amsterdam, and I made fun of UK politics.
Yeah, Christian Blair says, you should talk to either Destiny or Pisco about where power comes from, state versus citizen gun ownership. Well, I mean, to be honest, I think the past 6 months have probably illustrated my point that the Constitution is ultimately a piece of paper and a social construct that we all agreed to. And if large segments of the population don't agree to it, then it doesn't have the force to which we assign it. And so ultimately, it could come down to an armed struggle. Well, I think it's kind of different since Islam would be a religion. Yeah, I know. He's talking about criticizing the government. Pisco still thinks you're a fascist for more pro-gun than pro-democracy. I don't care. How's the stream, man, says John. You know what? I think it's Friday, so I'm kind of phoning it in a little bit. My apologies to chat, but realistically, we've been talking about the Second Amendment. We've been talking about guns. We've been talking about power. We've been talking about Ezra Klein and abundance liberalism. We've been talking about Tim Pool and Adam Conover, talking about liberalism versus illiberalism. So overall, it's still a pretty fun day. For donations, I got a couple of PayPal payments, which was very nice. But I will also just show right now, like the stream, subscribe if you're not subscribed, follow if you're not following. Super chats are always appreciated, never required. And who regulates the standard militia? Mostly the 2A. I don't know. The states do. The standard militia, in my opinion, the standard militia would be the National Guard. So if you're talking about the standing militia, that's National Guard, and that's regulated by the states. K. Soko says the Bill of Rights is about the right of the government can't infringe upon. Let me guess, Grassroots gave hundreds of dollars today. Unfortunately not. I think he was busy. K. Soko, the Bill of Rights is about the rights of the government can't infringe upon. Yes, it's about liberty. Liberty is the limits of the government to infringe on your freedoms. Kingslayer says, also sorry, Valor Media Network, for causing the derailment into the 2A. No, it's okay. It's fine. Let's get back to Adam Conover, though. I've been distracted enough.
It's made fun of American politics.
You wouldn't dare make fun of Islam, though. Go to the UK and mock Islam. Do it.
Well, I don't have any jokes about Islam.
Why not? They got Pakistani grooming games raping little girls. Why won't you go to the UK?
What?
Why won't you go to the UK and make jokes about Islam?
I don't think it's very funny. I don't have any jokes about it. I'm so confused. Dude.
And the reason why he's confused is because this came out of nowhere. I thought this was in the context that Adam Conover had some like anti-Christian jokes. That's what I thought that was. But this is actually just a random moment.
Okay, let me help unconfuse you. Are there jokes that can be made about Islam? Yes or no?
Wait, I don't want to. I don't want to go to this particular rabbit hole.
Oh no! You're terrified. You're a hypocrite.
What?
Are there jokes you can make about Islam? Muhammad banged a little girl, right?
I'm really baffled.
I'm terrified of the subject. I'm not.
No, I'm not.
In the UK, you can be jailed for making jokes about Islam or even bring up the grooming gangs. There are people who go online and pointed out that a stabbing was carried out by a Muslim, and they got arrested for it. I'll bet you $1,000.
Hold on. If I'm trying to Tim pulled a Connor. Okay, Tim pulled a Connor right here. So sometimes what'll happen in the middle of the conversation, I'll have like a neuron go off, and it'll be like non sequitur, let's go, and then I'll go. If I was to try to bridge and steelman what Tim's doing right now, he's saying that we have pretty good freedom of speech for our citizens in the United States, and we have okay freedom of speech for non-citizens. However, if you criticize the U.S. government and you talk about the United States in a way that's contrary to our interests, then we can deport you. However, you have very little to say about the European Commonwealth, where if you do anything, even remotely offensive to protected groups, then you can be jailed. So I think that you have to establish that Adam thinks that the freedom of speech associated in Europe is like good first. As a matter of fact, I'm going to rewind and take a look at it, but I don't think that you've established that fact. So you're kind of like going for a gotcha where you haven't established what the opponent believes yet. And because I'm lazy, I'm just going to let the content flow instead of reversing it, because I don't think Tim Pool has done a good job establishing that Adam Conover prefers speech laws in the Commonwealth. I don't think that's been established.
You will not go to the UK and make a joke about any of that stuff, because you will not go to a foreign country and, in violation of their laws, speak out against what they've said not to speak out against. Do it. I dare you. $10,000 cash in your pocket if you go to the UK and make a joke about Muhammad having a 12-year-old wife.
Tim's being like weirdly and unnecessarily hostile, and I'm happy that Adam is kind of taking it in good cheer. I think Tim is actually being hostile, which is odd. It's very mercurial. It's very strange.
This we got here faster than I thought we would in this conversation. Where you're shouting at me about something I don't understand. I don't really understand how
Yes,
you
you
would
do.
think it's incumbent upon
Do
me.
you think anybody watching this right now thinks you are confused by the notion that in the UK you go to jail for mocking Islam?
I don't understand how we got onto you shouting at me about Islam specifically. I'd like to return to the
Okay,
point I
it's
was trying to
because you
make.
said people should be allowed to come to this country and speak
Yeah.
out against it. And you said
I
you're a
think-
comedian and you're a
I
comedian and you
think
go to
that-
other countries, right? And you said you go
Mhm.
to the UK. And I said, okay, if you go to the UK, speak out in violation of their laws and see what happens. And you said, I'm confused. I don't understand. What don't you understand? Will you go to Turkey? Will you go to Turkey and speak out against Islam?
I mean, if I have a joke to make, sure. I don't have a joke about those particular
will.
topics.
You would.
I would.
You're saying if you had a joke about
Oh
Islam.
yeah, sure. I would try to do the best I can. I always try to poke the bear as much as I can. It's part of the job of a
There's nothing
comedian.
to poke the bear
because-
about as it pertains to one of the world's largest religions. I mean, come on.
I mean, I haven't written a joke about that recently.
All right. Then I
So look,
forward to going to the UK.
hey man, I'm a free speech guy, right? I think that something that's nice about America is that we're a country that has that value, and that we don't generally think that you should be tossed into a van and kicked out of the country for expressing an opinion. I think that it is a change.
right to
I
be
think it's a change in America to most people around the world to feel that, oh, wait, if I go to America and I express a mild opinion about their foreign policy in my own student paper, or maybe on a stage or maybe somewhere else, I could be, without any warning to me, accosted by 6 people on the street, thrown into a van, and taken out of the country.
Oh, come on,
right?
accosted.
Oh, let me finish.
Don't load the
I think that's a strain. I think that's a new idea for a lot of people, that America is that type of country. I think that Donald Trump's purpose is to turn America into that type of country. I think that.
So Adam Conover has an episode called Elon Musk Killed Free Speech. So
Elon Musk has been having a bad.
I'm not going to watch it right now. This was 6 months ago, and I'm not going to watch it for the opinion. I'm just going to kind of hope that he articulates it. But the chapters, we got Trump rally, free speech, what Elon did, the real reason. So maybe he has a pro-European stance here. But I wish Tim had established that before jumping down his throat.
That's bad. I think it makes the country smaller. I think it makes the country worse. I think it's a violation of most of the values that I grew up with as an American. And that's my view of what's happening in the country. Now, if you want to say, hey, I don't like free speech for foreign nationals who are in the country who express mild opinions about other countries' foreign wars, then that's your prerogative. It's a big difference between us that you don't like free speech in that way.
I mean, that's loaded language, right?
Yeah, all the language you're using is pretty loaded.
Well, you keep using adjectives.
Hold up. Why is Adam doing so good now? Listen, I'm sorry if my appreciation of Adam is coming out, because I do think this is one of the most annoying guys on the internet, primarily through his show. However, that's pretty funny that like he's like, oh well, you're using loaded language, and Adam's like, yeah, I mean, like all this language is pretty politically and socially loaded. Yeah, I agree. He just kind of like stoner giga chatted it. That's kind of dope.
To describe things, to diminish one thing while exacerbate or exaggerate something else.
I do use the English language to express my thoughts and opinions. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's it's straw manning. It's not a legitimate attack of the ideas, right? So accosted on the street. Come on. She was arrested. Okay. She was arrested by a relatively large group of men compared to what a normal arrest would require, which I think they didn't need to do and was silly. So we can say she was arrested by several men, unmarked, or plain clothes, which didn't need to happen. But I don't need to say like she was accosted by men on the street. And
that seems like a silly objection.
And it's like, okay, listen, the facts of the case, like I said, I don't like the idea that people come to this country and then try and tell us how to do, how to live our lives.
You're not for free speech. I understand.
I think American citizens have self-determination and sovereignty. And I will say this even of the Canadians who keep coming here and they keep getting involved in our politics. I'm friends with some of them, but I think it's fair to say that there is an issue with Canadians, largely conservatives, who come to this country and then start advocating for conservative values in a country they're not from.
So,
to be fair, there are liberal Canadians who do it too. I find it to be silly. That being said, Canada as a bordering nation with a largely overlapping culture is a morally different question, but still applies in much the same way principally. So I do take issue with foreigners coming to my country.
it's a nice white country, so we like it.
Canada's they call it what, the most multicultural country in the world, I think.
Mm-hmm.
They big on immigration. I think Toronto is considered to be the most multicultural city in the world.
Yeah.
Sacred Snow called this out better than I did. You're a hypocrite because you won't do racist jokes. Also, you're using loaded language. Now, Islam, I'll point out, it wouldn't be racism. It would be ethno-religious bigotry. But that doesn't roll off the tongue like racism, right? So, yeah, I think that him having like a chill reaction to that was probably the best way for him to go. That was pretty funny. Death Lily says, grabbing a woman in mass without badges is oopsie doopsie. Whoops. Yeah, they did have badges. Can we abolish the word straw manning? Yeah, anybody who actually doesn't understand logical fallacies and argumentation needs to stop using them. And then people who do understand them properly should use them very sparingly. One of the most insufferable parts about the not so erudite versus Jay Dyer conversation was they kept talking about logical fallacies instead of talking about the topic. Very annoying.
Yeah.
So Canada actually is, you can call it a nice white country. That's technically the truth, but it also is very, very much in favor of immigration and diversity and all these things, largely what many of the conservatives who come here speaking out against. But without, you know,
this is a country where if you're from another country and you're in America, don't say anything about our politics, or you could be forcibly removed from the country. You're comfortable with America being that kind of country. That's something that's like that's a value of yours. Those are your values.
See, you're doing it again.
No,
I'm trying
to understand what you actually believe.
Yeah, I'd say marginally it's a good,
because I think that's a point of distinction. Like it's useful in a conversation like this to be like, okay, I have my value, you have your value, and my value is like, I really like it when people say what the fuck they think about any country's politics.
We can simplify it.
No, why, dude? Why am I starting to respect the annoying soy you're wrong about stuff guy? Adam ruins everything. Dude, I hate this guy. Like his show is so smug and so incorrect, and yet he's just nailing this where he's just like, hey bro, I love freedom. I love freedom of speech. I love freedom of conscience. I don't like it that we're black bagging non-citizens on the side of the road in order to deport them from our country for reasons that seem silly. I actually don't like it when other countries do that. And then Tim's like, yeah, well, it's based though. It's like, what? Why? Why is it based, bro? What are we talking about here? I have no problem with how Adam characterized detainment, but then again, I call arrest governments authorized kidnapping. You are a libertarian, aren't you, Kingslayer? Parasocial love to you, but that sounds like based off of the guns conversation, based off of that statement, I'm presuming that you kind of identify or formally identified with libertarianism. Death Lily 76, which by the way, like it's not like a dirty word around here. The only reason why it's dirty is because so many people are anarcho-capitalists, and I find anarcho-capitalists very difficult to talk to. Death Lily 76 is technically, according to Tim, his Korean grandma should have been deported. Yeah, probably. I guarantee you she probably had all sorts of things to say about American forward involvement.
My value would just be, to whatever mathematical degree, American sovereignty supersedes the right of foreigners to speak about our policies.
But in this case,
that's just my value.
So you think that literally any time America is exercising its sovereignty, that's like a good thing in that particular case? Like, because
what does that mean?
Like,
you're a guest in our with all due respect, I think I said it like 6-7 times. You're a guest in our country. Adhere to the rules. That's it. That includes conservative Canadians, conservative Brits. That's Carl Benjamin. That's Paul Joseph Watson. That's Viva Fry. That's Seth Rogen. And it's also
so all those people
If they got deported, I'd say, okay.
should not speak about American national interests.
They can, but they might get deported. You know, they're free to say it. They just might suffer a legal consequence. And by the way, I don't know how much I buy this concept that if Sargon of Akkad says some like wild shit on his podcast, that he's going to be like, yeah, deport him. But maybe there's enough resentment there of foreigners sharing their opinions of American politics that Tim's trying to like stake out some ground where he's like, I don't care what you say because you're not American. He does this like weird isolationist thing. He did it in our debate, and he also does it randomly, where I think that as soon as you leave the borders of the United States, I think this guy, he no longer thinks of you as actually existing. Like once you leave the borders of the United States, if you're not a US citizen, you no longer exist, and he no longer cares about your existence, which is crazy. Like I love the concept of nationalism, like building a country around shared values, maybe a shared language, and then like kind of perpetuating like a social construct forward through history that you can take pride in. I like that kind of nationalism, but I don't like whatever the hell Tim's talking about, where he's like, well, if you're from a different nation state, I don't care about your well-being. It's like, why? We're all human. We're all a part of the human species. Why do we stop caring about people as soon as they're no longer a part of our nation? It's like a very weird, in my opinion, way to conceptualize humanity. Conservative liberalism says, but what if the quote unquote rules fly in the face of what our founders recognized as natural and inalienable rights? I mean, yeah, for sure. I told you about a week ago, I'm a former libertarian who is now basically a libertarian leaning conservatarian. Okay, cool. Sorry if I forgot your specific political lore, but you know, bear in mind there are a few dozen of you guys. So, and I love you parasocially because you probably love guns and love freedom. So that already right there is like top of the list, even when we disagree. There's 50 farmers in South Africa that have more global impact than Tim Pool. Maybe. That's so dumb. My best friends live overseas. Right. It's kind of silly. So to get Tim Pool to care, the U.S. has to establish a one world government. I guess the United States needs to conquer the whole world in order for Tim Pool to care. Somehow I accept these terms.
Like the Suez Canal, we shouldn't say
the
Panama Canal, or like is Puerto Rico a state or not?
Visa.
They should not speak about American politics.
You can speak about what you want, but speech has consequences.
Ooh.
I mean,
Doesn't it?
okay, so we can move on. I'll say, to me, that's a radically different America than I thought I grew up in. And I think it's fucked up that we're becoming that kind of country. I think it's really bad.
That's true.
Yeah, you don't believe I think that's true?
Well, I mean, I suppose I
like what I just said. I believe you're like, you don't believe that.
Well, because we if we go back several administrations, that's not been the case ever. I mean, look at New York in the 2000s when the Bush administration rounded people up, and well, I'm sorry, it wasn't Bush, during the Bush years, and they put 200 people in like a bus. They locked them in a bus cage.
Yeah, that was bad.
That's the country you grew up in. The idea that these things haven't been happening. George Carlin got arrested for swearing. We had blasphemy laws on the book.
Yeah, and it was bad. And then we said, oh, we shouldn't do that anymore.
And it never changed. The idea that you think you grew up in a nation where you could say whatever you wanted is an absurdity. George Carlin went to jail for swearing.
And that was good, you think?
No,
because
it wasn't.
you think it's good that Rumeysa Öztürk is being forced to leave the country.
Citizen.
So
she's on a conditional visa as conditioned by the INA and the existing administration and the will of the voters.
Okay, but you're arguing.
No. My argument is
you're arguing that Öztürk's
country
deportation makes sense because George Carlin was arrested for swearing.
No, you said I grew up in a country with free speech, and I said no, you did not.
And
it's never been true.
And you're like, okay, that's yes, you're right. So under your view, America is a country that doesn't have free speech, never had free speech.
Yes,
and that's a good thing.
No,
because we're exercising our sovereignty.
No.
Okay, but you think it's a good thing that Rumeysa Öztürk doesn't have free speech?
You understand the distinction between a non-citizen here on a conditional visa and an American citizen being arrested for swearing?
I understand that there's a distinction. I don't think that either of those people should be treated differently in that case.
Let me say this.
I don't agree with you, man.
This country has never had free speech.
Okay, I think
it's a fact. When the founding fathers finalized the Constitution,
do you think we should have free speech?
Yes, but there are limits on what free speech is.
Okay, he might get to it as a steel man, all right? And this is actually my frustration with Pisco and with other liberals, by the way, is that with the Second Amendment, we, especially from like a liberal perspective, we've accepted that there are reasonable limits. So when we talk about like nuclear weapons, most people who are reasonable accept the fact that we don't want Jethro over in Christmas, Florida, with a population of 1,500 people to have access to a nuclear weapon, because he might get suicidal one day. He might get, drunk and, just decide that he wants to end it all. And it might be fun for him to end it all by detonating a nuclear device on the east side of Orlando, killing tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. So the reason why we don't give nukes to citizens is because that's a reasonable limit on the right of the people to keep and bear arms. I could articulate other ones, but I don't. I just want you to grant that we put a reasonable limit on the Second Amendment because we think that there could be disastrous consequences if we don't put that limit. Okay. So the same way that I argue, because I think Pisco has effectively argued free speech absolutism for every single person inside the United States of America, and that every single person, including aliens, should be able to advocate for terrorist organizations within the borders of the United States. My argument is the same way that there's reasonable limits to firearms, there's reasonable limits to speech. I cannot commit the crime of assault where I insult you and say that I'm going to hurt you, right? That's a crime. And so as a result, if I say, if I'm in the presence of Tim Pool and I say, hey, Tim, in 30 seconds, I'm coming across this table and I'm going to beat you to death, then a cop can show up and arrest me, right? Now, when it comes to speech, I think a foreign national, the same way that a nuke might be unreasonable. You guys are not seeing it. Because you were raised with like a liberal perspective on speech, by the way, so was I. You think that like words are just wind, and words aren't wind. Okay, we've seen how much words change the fates of nations within the past decade. So when it comes to Trump, this dude has lied and proselytized and used every psychological manipulative tactic in the book in order to build a cult of personality around himself, with which he has extremely damaged the fabric of our republic. So words are not wind. And so having foreign nationals come to our country and say, actually, it's cool to commit murder, that is 100% against my values, and you can get the fuck away from me. Conservative liberalism disagrees, which is going to be interesting. Nope, it's because nukes aren't bearable arms. Not with that attitude. I'm gonna show you. You're wrong. What is it? Number one, Google suitcase nuke. Suitcase nuclear device is a tactical nuclear weapon that is portable enough that it can be used in a suitcase as a delivery method. So that's number one. Suitcase nuke. Number two, hell bomb. You're wrong. Oh man, good times. Then, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will get your ass deported because they hurt my feelings. No, because you're advocating for jihadist terrorism and you can fuck off from my country. Excuse me. Sorry for using the profanity, but that's how I feel. Gen X says, I missed the last hour of Tim's analysis. Anything major I should rewind for it? No. He's just, he's doing apologia. In the beginning, I forget what he was arguing about, but it was something relatively nonsensical. Where they landed was whether or not, they were talking about Kilmar Abrego Garcia and whether or not he should have been deported. He basically said that it's a paperwork issue. It's not a big deal. They could resolve it with a Zoom call. And then Adam Conover said, actually, it's kind of a big deal. And I don't like that our government is playing with fire in this regard. That kind of mirrors on to the next topic, in which they're talking about freedom of speech for immigrants, like Ozturk, who wrote that op-ed. And so as a result, Adam is of the opinion that if you do mild criticism of the United States, you should not be deported. I actually agree with Adam Conover there. But then Tim says, well, you're here at our whim, and that's been enshrined law for decades. So I don't think that it's somehow like an alarmist position to deport people for their political opinions, because realistically, we've been doing this forever. That's his thing. And I can't tell with Tim what's like an earnestly deep-held belief, what's contrarianism, what's him appealing to his right-wing, base, and what's him being like edgy for the sake of conversation. I can't tell anymore. The MAGAs are losing their minds over 8647. Yeah. No, it's 100% free speech. I'm gonna stand on business with 8647. 86 in a restaurant context is you ran out of something. So 86, when I say 86 romaine lettuce, this was my example on Twitter. 86 romaine lettuce does not mean that I want to murder romaine lettuce. It means we're out of romaine lettuce, so do not order anything else with romaine lettuce. So saying 8647 saying that I don't want Donald Trump to be a thing anymore, so get him out of here. That way people no longer have to deal with his bullshit. It's not a death threat. Conserve says, ideas exist independent of an individual's words. Our lack of willingness to address them makes us weak. Making the words disappear doesn't disappear the ideas. Yeah, I don't care. But some ideas are evil. I can address jihadist terrorism while the advocate for jihadist terrorism advocates it within Syria. I don't need a jihadist terrorist to live next door to me to fight jihadist terrorism rhetorically. Words are never just words. That's completely true. Yeah. I guess there is a suitcase nuke. Based, I win. You won earlier. Keisoko won earlier, but I have won several chat fights today. The test against Tim Pool's perspective is ask if people should go to jail for saying slurs. Yeah, but he's going to say that citizens and non-citizens are different classes of people. Is Keisoko shocked by the suitcase nuke or me wanting to deport non-citizens? That's Hassan, though. Advocating for terrorists. I expect Trump to eventually come for him. Oh, Christ, I wish. I would cut off a piece of my body to fire Hassan Piker out of a trebuchet towards Cuba. In my country, free speech is for citizens, but it does not include advocating for violence. Well, there you go. Boom. Terrorism or whatever, that's not even allowed for citizens. I mean, it is. It's written explicitly in the Constitution. Oh, okay. In Portugal? What's your country of origin again? I think I hate the pearl clutching and hypocrisy the most when it comes to MAGA. Yes. We say we're 86ing the items from a budget bill at the time. Yeah. Personal suitcase nukes. Okay. Yeah. Which piece, though? I was about to say, Keisoko, you're going to have to get used to me being a piece of garbage some of the time. Bulgaria. That's interesting. Which piece, though? I mean, if you wanted me to do it without thinking about it, I would cut off like a finger or a toe. If you wanted me to kind of be like, is it worth it? Like a hand or a foot. Between Miller and Heller, a suitcase is a bearable military arm. Therefore, citizens should have the right. Lol. Well, Kingslayer, unironically, you agree with Tim Pool over here. Gen X says, Connor, I saw someone speculating that Hassan is a CIA back to make leftists look bad. Maybe it was even you. Lol. I think it was me. I think it was saying that Hassan Piker is so optically terrible for the left that unironically, like, he could be getting, there could be dozens of CIA agents in his chat egging him on to make leftists look bad, and they might be spending hundreds if not thousands of dollars a month in order to prop up his channel. Now, that's a conspiracy theory. I have no evidence of it, but I think that he is so optically toxic to American left-wing politics, I would not be surprised if people who hated him backed him and goaded him in chat. I would not be surprised.
Based on the moral worldview of the individual argument. For instance, do you believe someone should be allowed to direct someone to commit a violent crime?
That's not the moral worldview of an argument. That is the effect of the speech. So you think that whether you have free speech should be your words should be based on the moral worldview of the argument.
So to understand
certain
your
arguments
view of what free speech means, I'm asking you a question.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody says explicitly, you right now commit crime to that person, is that free speech?
Someone says you right now commit crime to that person, and what do they do it?
Yes.
I mean, I guess I'm not a free speech scholar, but like that is there's probably be legal consequences for that free speech.
It is illegal to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think someone should be able to yell fire in a crowded theater?
I mean, this is the canonical example of speech that's not free speech. So
I think also that, who was it? It was somebody, it was Hitchens, I think, who showed that technically, legally, you can shout fire in a crowded theater, but it has to be contextual. So number one, fire in a crowded theater can be said in the context of a joke because he said it as a joke. And then I also think that he brought up that you could do it when there's an actual fire. So if you're describing something true, you can say it. If you're doing a satire, you can say it. But I think the point of the fire example is that if you do it with criminal intent where you're trying to hurt people, then that can be illegal. And then, I'm sorry, my Hebrew friend, but I do forget how to pronounce your name. The probability of Hassan Piker being backed by the CIA is about as probable as the existence of Bigfoot and the moon being made of cheese. Well, hold on. So I'm not saying that the CIA intentionally, goes out of their way and they're like, we love Hassan Piker. Let's recruit Hassan Piker as an agent of the CIA. That's not what I'm saying. The main thing that I'm saying is nefarious actors might goad Hassan Piker to going even further left than he naturally would, and they might even pay money to incentivize him to do so to make the left wing look even worse than it is. I wouldn't be surprised by that.
Actually is. That's Brandenburg v. Ohio. It is, in fact, legal speech. I don't think people should. I understand the Supreme Court's ruling on that issue. The challenge with free speech, let's go back to the beginning of this country. Blasphemy laws were on the books after they even had the First Amendment. Like they literally say you can't blaspheme. We would say that's not free speech, but how did you have a First Amendment if you arrested people for blaspheming? My point is,
because the original Bill of Rights was written as a limit on the federal government, not necessarily that of the states. And it wasn't until the Supremacy Clause that states were reeled back in where they couldn't do things that were in violation of the Constitution. That's why. It wasn't until we had federal Supremacy Clause that states weren't allowed to violate the First, Second, or Fourth, or whatever amendment. Gail Hashalom, like the Scottish ugh and loch. Gail hash loch Kail. That's how I would do it. Hashalom.
And this is an anarchist philosophy. The laws of the country are dictated by those with the power to enforce it. That's why it used to be illegal to put a pie on your windowsill, but even though it's still illegal, nobody arrests you for it. So free speech does change throughout the generations.
Of course.
We never grew up in an era, we never had a time in our lives where you had true free speech the way the absolutists want it to be.
Yeah, I'm talking about the story that we tell about ourselves as a country, man. I'm talking about
it's not true.
I'm talking about the values that we have collectively as people. And of course, those are always changing a little bit and people are trying to pull them in one direction or another.
Split in half.
I would have thought, that I don't know that much about you. I know you're very involved with Occupy and stuff like that and protest movements, which I think is cool work. I would have thought that a student writing an op-ed about another country's war and her own institution's support for it, vis-a-vis our country's foreign policy, would be the kind of thing that you would think is a sort of free speech that we should value. That is the kind of free speech that I think I personally think a lot of the idea of America is built upon. I think it's one of the good things about the country.
So what Tim has said is that this is a mythology, that Adam has been sucked into a mythology. And I kind of agree with Tim. We can have an infinitely more cynical analysis of American history. But where I agree with Adam is, well, what should we be? Should we be a place of freedom of conscience, freedom of speech? Should we be a place of the right to self-defense up to and including against your government? Should we be a place that has rules that limit the powers of government so they don't abuse their own citizenry? And my answer unequivocally is yes. And so the mythology might be a sanitization of our history, and we might not have lived up to these espoused values. But there are times that we did, and there's times that we didn't. And so I think that Adam might have a naive perspective, and I think that's what Tim is pointing to, is that Adam has a naive perspective about what the United States of America is, but that doesn't change just because, we weren't as good as we should have been, doesn't mean that we don't continue to try to be better all the time. So I actually don't like this line of I agree with Adam more than I do Tim, which I'm not going to lie is shocking. I was coming into this debate prepared to dislike Adam very intensely, and since the beginning of the debate, I think he's done a great job. The earlier part with Kilmar Abrego Garcia, I think, was not strong. But besides that, I think he's doing okay, holding his own in a contentious atmosphere.
Country, that this is a country where you can come here and you can express your opinion mildly in the newspaper.
What happened at Kent State?
And it's yeah, I think Kent State was bad.
My point is,
I
there's
think
things
it was
we
bad,
wish
man.
America was, but I kind of feel like a non-citizen.
But this
getting,
one you
getting
said
deported,
you think is good. You're not sitting here going, ah, man, yeah,
she
that's
got
a bummer.
deported,
She got
dude. What are you
deported.
talking about? She didn't get shot in the face. A conditional visa was revoked. I'm not crying about it. I don't care.
I mean, I think she cares. I think
That's
her
too
family
fucking
cares. I
bad.
think the people of her university care. I think other.
Little Timmy, he's lost his empathy, which is fine. You know, it's fine to not be the most empathetic, like cry hard, sad person on the planet where like anything bad happens in the world and you just fall to pieces. But I also think that Tim's gotta be, he knows he's being an a-hole, right? He's like, oh, she got deported, boo-hoo. And it's like, okay, but we're still talking about the principles of the matter. And not only are we talking about the principles of the matter, but it seems like you don't care about what are considered foundational American concepts. So like, what are we doing here, bud? What are we doing? So I think Adam's soy, but I agree with Adam.
Sure.
I think, like,
Change the law, man. This is a marginal issue for a single person who was in violation of the INA as it's enforced by a government that was elected by a popular majority, or I should say by a plurality, but the popular vote. So let me pull this up because this is what we were talking about earlier. This is RCP from April 22nd. Every age bracket, to be fair, 40-49 is a tie, but Real Clear Politics aggregate shows from all of the latest polls, 70 plus is the only age group that is a negative view of Trump's job.
okay.
Well, hold on. I don't think this is what he claimed earlier, but let's take a look at it. So approve 42, 43, 45, 45, 49, and 40. And then 18 to 29 is almost like dead even. 30 to 39, weird. Millennials broke for Trump. That's kind of crazy. Middle millennials. Wow. That's actually, this is almost shocking to me. Young people are almost dead even. Middle millennials broke for Trump. This was almost dead even, almost even, and then strongly disapproved. This is crazy. Even if Tim characterized it incorrectly, this is insane. This is the internet generation. This is the older internet generation. This basically means, in my opinion, this means that Charlie Kirk, Candace Owens, and Nick Fuentes are actually incredibly influential and did shift the Overton window extremely far right, because that's a 10-point gap. That's crazy. Damn, it's my generation's fault. It's actually my generation's fault. That's funny. Holy shit. I need to see more independent poll data? Sure. I just think it's interesting. Old School says Adam is soy. Connor agrees with Adam. Conclusion, Connor is soy. QED. Dude, what is this? Has to be like a gaming meme. What? Because Mike from PA screams that, right? He's like, QED, end of debate. QED is an abbreviation for the Latin phrase quod erat demonstratum, which was to be demonstrated. No, that's not it. What does QED stand for? Somebody tell me. Proves that you were trying to prove. QED is an abbreviation. Really? You're using QED as in you proved my point? That's kind of high-minded for random internet slang. That's kind of crazy. I weep for the younger generation. It's our fault. I need to see more multiple independent. Yes, Khalil, if I remember your name correctly. To be fair, it was worse for January 6th and bump stocks. I might have voted for Trump. Interesting. Yeah, he said every age gap except 70 plus is pro-Trump. Yeah, that's not correct. It's a dead even split, except for this one, and then 30 to 39 breaks for Trump. This is even. This is a 2 point. This is a 1 point. Okay. All right. Now, unfortunately,
okay.
It was, we're celebrating my son's birthday this weekend. Okay. So I might actually have to wrap up here. However, we might have to cancel the party because he has gotten sick. And so my wife is actually, we're at 4 hours and 32 minutes. And to be honest, you know, these guys are having an interesting conversation, but it is funny to me that they clipped him out of context for the Islam joke. And that was not what it was at all. Tim randomly make a joke about Islam in the context of talking about free speech, but it wasn't because Adam Conover is a hypocrite, or insofar as it was not demonstrated that Adam Conover is a hypocrite. So weirdly enough, old school is correct. Adam Conover is really soy and kind of annoying. And so I presume that I would go into it and I would be able to back Tim. But ultimately, you know, Adam Conover believes in freedom, and Tim apparently believes in freedom insofar as it doesn't conflict with Trump. And so Adam was just like, that's insane. So chill real quick. Like the stream if you haven't liked it already. That lets other people know that we're live, and it helps them come in and have fun with us and hang out and chat and watch funny, weird, stupid content. So please like the stream.